the first time this has happened. Well, this is a statement I make fairly often. There was a time during the reign of President Moi, there was a gentleman called Total Man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was unthinkable that a time would ever come when such a person could actually be arrested and taken to jail. He was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spent the night in custody.
It wasn't even one. It was more than one. And people wondered then whether this was actually an end of an era, as an ERA. But the man bounced back, new, improved, stronger than ever, and continued for the longest time possible. Yes. So, with reference to the good governor of Nairobi, the thing that stands out is just the amount of attention the media has given him. It tells you just how he's viewed. Very few people get this amount of attention. With the exception of two. The president, Raila Odinga. The deputy president also gets a bit of his share. But this gentleman is getting serious press.
Yep, he is.
What happens to Nairobi? I think that's also the other question that emerges here. So the bail ruling is set to be delivered tomorrow by the judge. And then what happens after that? So the Standard is actually giving like 4 options. 1, an amendment to the County Government Act to provide for a member of his cabinet to act as a governor pending conclusion of the cases against him. So, the law does not contemplate the absence from office of a governor and a deputy governor at the same time without it being declared a vacancy. So that's the other argument between absence and vacancy. So,
who's got to declare it a vacancy though? I mean, it's clear.
A vacancy is the Constitution actually has stipulations for vacancy. You know, you have been impeached, you have been jailed, you have, been, you have resigned yourself, all those. And this one is just absence. You know, even the Constitution talks about the instances when the deputy governor takes over is in the case of absence from office.
Right.
When the deputy governor acts. So, in this particular case, because we don't have a deputy governor, then what happens if the governor is barred from accessing office? 1, amend that constitution, amend the act, and allow one of the CECs, one of the how many CECs are serving? 4. One of the 4 to run the county. 2, impeach by the county assembly, so that then we have an election within 60 days, and between then the speaker is acting. Or the president could suspend the county government for 90 days, pending an election under Article 192 of the Constitution. This, of course, calls for formation of a commission to investigate and recommend the dissolution of the county government.
Right.
Or Sonko himself could be jailed, or even Sonko himself could just, today, before tomorrow, appoint a deputy.
Right.
And now leave it to the county assembly to debate his choice of a deputy.
It'll be interesting to see how things unfold concerning this in the next few days or so. But that seems to be something that has grabbed. It's interesting because it has grabbed attention across the divide. Because now you say, okay, what's going to happen, especially for the seat of Nairobi, and what decisions will be taken about that.
I stand by what I was saying yesterday. I think option number 3 would be the best for Nairobi. Find a way to form a commission to dissolve the entire government of Nairobi. Let the people of Nairobi have a second chance at electing a credible government, both MCAs and governor.
So the Africa, Pacific and Caribbean Commission actually opened their meeting yesterday, and the presidents from 10 states are actually in attendance. Or rather the leaders from 10 of these countries in attendance. And during this, Uhuru Kenyatta, president obviously, has called out imbalanced trade agreements between the European Union and ACP members. This was yesterday, and he has termed the current trade agreements with the European Union as largely imbalanced. He was delivering his address yesterday as the incoming president of the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States. And he says the EU for a long time has been the export destination for products from the 79 member state group, but lamented the fact that the relationship has not always favored its members. So we're seeing a different kind of discourse now. I think previously it has always been this is the situation. But now we see the discourse, especially from African heads, saying it has got to change, especially since now, obviously, we realize what it is that you've been telling us over time, that we are the richest and most resourceful when it comes to continents. And so in terms of demand for how things should change, you all need to start listening to what it is that we have to say. This was kind of the thrust of his message yesterday, and hopefully it will fall on ears, because he has now said he vows to mobilize member states during his term at the block's helm to transform their own economies. And I think this resonates with what we're seeing happening at the Kusi Festival of Ideas in Rwanda as well. So could be a different kind of conversation that's taking place. Let's hope it yields results.
Indeed. Jerry, what do you have in the headline?
I'm looking at an interesting and a tragic story. Did teacher kill his 13-year-old mother of his baby? And this is murder most foul. Eric Okor has been charged before Homa Bay Court with murder of a girl and her 10-month-old baby, whom he said to have sired in a cruel bid to destroy evidence. So, of course, that's her probably going for child support. And also, of course, being underage would have been fallen naturally into statutory rape. And the baby is DNA. So the teacher was charged with murder of a Class 8 pupil, sadly. It's a primary school teacher. And he's been charged over the killing of a Class 8 pupil and a 10-month-old daughter who allegedly he sired a child with. So that's an ongoing case. Interesting one.
Indeed. In Finland, a 34-year-old Sanna Marin will be sworn in as the next Prime Minister of Finland. She'll head a coalition whose 4 other parties are all led by women, 3 of them in their 30s.
These guys know what's up, don't they? These
32-year-old leader of the Left Alliance Party, Lee Anderson, Maria Ohisalo, 34, leader of the Green League Party, and 32-year-old Katril Kalmuni, the finance minister and leader of the Centre Party. The fourth one in that coalition is 55-year-old leader of the Swedish People's Party. Imagine, the world's youngest prime minister at 34.
And female, of course.
Yes.
Most
Female as
importantly, I think.
Yes. There's a story that you'll find interesting on page 5, Jerry.
The married women top city abortion cases. Page 5 of The Standard, are you looking at?
Yes.
Yes, an interesting piece of, some statistics here. It's a study by Murray Stopes, and they say Kenya shows 22.4% of those seeking to end pregnancies were actually in a union, i.e. being married, so a spousal union, I assume. About a quarter of the women procuring abortions in Nairobi are either married, living with a partner, or cohabiting. A study by Murray Stopes, Kenya, in one of its 6 clinics in Nairobi showed, I've said it's 22.4%, and the study was published in the journal. There's a journal called Plus One, and it reflects data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and it's indicating that almost half of the pregnancies among married women in Kenya are unintended. So interesting one. Perhaps contraception goes out of the window when you're married, and or perhaps you already have children, so you don't want any more children. So it's a very interesting one. Of course, abortion is still illegal in Kenya, as per the law. So it's interesting, that one.
It is.
Looking at the counties is interesting, because now water everywhere seems to be out of every county, and the stories that are being reported this morning, something to do with the floods, is featuring from Homa Bay to Kisii to Mombasa to Lamu to Kwale, Baringo, Uasin Gishu, Murang'a, Meru, Kirinyaga. I mean, everybody is talking about issues having to do with the current flooding situation in the country, whether you can't sand harvest anymore, and it's been banned now because the rains are pounding, and we need the sand to stay in place. Looking at other parts where people are still waiting for food aid, really, yes, across the county. And then in Nairobi, the taps are dry amid heavy rains. And motorists are still being charged 400 shillings parking fee in the CBD, despite the court order to have that directive halted. The Nairobi County government continues to charge motorists 400 shillings in the Central Business District, despite the High Court temporarily halting the raise last week, until a case filed by the Consumer Federation of Kenya is determined. COFEC, through lawyer Henry Nakuru, sued City Hall following its announcement raising parking fees in the city centre from 200 to 400. So there's a lot of hullabaloo in there. But if you're going into the city, you're still being charged 400 shillings.
So with Sonko inside, who would be responsible for ensuring that that's
This is the thing.
reduced and that the court order is followed?
Things are in limbo, really.
Who's the boss?
Betty. Elachi, that
Oh,
is.
right.
As things stand, constitutionally, Betty Elachi is in charge, I think.
Should get there. All right, so we're taking a look at what's happening in the headlines, what's been reported in the headlines, the major headlines this morning. Of course, you can download the Standard e-paper app from Google Play Store and Apple App Store, and with just one subscription fee, you get to access all of Standard Group publications, including today being a Financial Tuesday, which, of course, looks at matters financial and business. Kenya's clean energy offers surge amid oversupply. Of course, there's also the story from of what happened at the tallow oil and leadership wrangles and helm issues at the top that led to the almost collapse of the share price of tallow internationally. And what does that do to Tallow's operations in Africa? In Ghana, they had issues. In Kenya, they have issues. One of the reasons why they had to fire the CEO was because of operational issues in Ghana. Technical hiccups that have seen the firm's output reduced drastically. That is in the Financial Standard. You can, of course, access that from Standard Group's publication, the Standard e-paper on Spice FM. Good morning. It's 6:15.
Everything nice, alright, okay. Spice up your life.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Eric Lati. We have CT Muga, we have Nduoko and Nyeri Thorn. Of course, we discuss various conversations. We have various conversations throughout the 4 hours of the show between now and 10 o'clock. Ndu.
Right, so the year 2019 is coming to a close, and this has been the year where we have seen more mass protests in more places around the world than any other 12 months in history. So from continent to continent, we've seen citizens get into the streets and rather clamor for some kind of change that they wanted to see in the governments of the countries within which they lived in. Now, if you look previously in history, we had a lot of bloody protests. There were mass killings. There were what you would call massacres from China to as late as 2011, where we saw the Assad-led massacres in Syria. All over the world, there have been protests. But now in 2019, we see protests that have taken much longer, and they've been clamoring for some kind of change. And what I'm saying this morning is that the kind of protests that we see, especially in 2019, are the ones that are going to bring long-lasting change. And if you want to see any kind of change in the and by using protest as that, it has got to be persistent, and it has got to be something that you see the long end before you stop. A lot of times it ended with killing and somebody was ousted. There was a coup, somebody left government. But in this case, like in Hong Kong, for example, the last 6 months has been constant protest. It's been 3 months of protests in Chile. It's been 4 months of protests in Lebanon. Over and over again, the world is replete with examples of what we've seen. People decided, look, nobody's listening to us. The best way to do this is go into the streets and stop all operations in order for somebody to get our or for us to get the attention of the powers that be. And I am saying that the best way to go about this is the way we've been seeing it. It is significant that we see such a high number in 2019. And I'm saying that here, with what we have, it is necessary to see the long haul, or actually go for the long haul, in order to see any kind of permanent change. Results that came from previous waves of rebellion have been rather absent in 2019, and that's because the results that came from such protests were quick. They were immediate. Somebody died, or many people died, that person was removed from power, and somebody was given another opportunity to come in and sit in government. What we see now is a long clamor, a long, constant going into the streets and not leaving, especially what we see in Lebanon, especially what we had seen in Egypt and other countries in the during the Arab Spring. People were in the streets until something actually happened. And I think that if we're going to see any kind of lasting and permanent change, the protest actually must take on a lasting kind of effect, because you can get in and stay for a minute or two and then you're gone, but nothing really happens. But what has come out as a result of what we've seen is that there has been negotiation, and there have been things that have been done. Leaders have actually stepped down, some have resigned, and now the clamor for constitutional reform in a lot of these countries has actually taken center stage as far as negotiations are concerned. So the fight then essentially leaves the street, and then it goes into government seats such as parliament, whereby people are actually discussing as opposed to fighting, and now a semblance has been created of at least let's sit down and talk about this and see how we can make the change. And I think that probably is where you will see in terms of long-lasting change.
So we're seeing protests lasting longer than usual as well, right? In medical terms, there's sometimes when doctors actually come and advise you that some of the drugs that they have developed resistance.
Right.
You have used these drugs for so long that now they have found a way of, the bacteria that you're fighting has found a way of just surviving in your body. Isn't that the same case here we're seeing with the leadership? They've just become resistant to, you guys go to the streets. Go ahead and protest.
Resistance, Eric, a little more than that. What often happens is that whenever there's a prescription, you're actually told that you should actually ingest or take this medication for a certain number of days. Now, most people will take medication when they feel unwell.
Yes.
The moment they feel better, they stop. Now, this also contributes to the very thing that you're saying, the resistance. Yes, because you don't actually get it to do what it's supposed to do. And thereafter, remember, if you actually take it as prescribed, chances of ensuring that whatever was causing the illness is eliminated is greater. If you don't, all you do is scare it, and there is enough of whatever it is you're taking to alert it to what it is, it'll adapt to it, and thereafter, that medication is no longer effective.
So if you apply it as it should be, as it has been measured, apply it with all intents and purposes of seeing it to the end, you will actually achieve the desired results, that you will get well. And the same can be applied here. And we've seen the folks in Chile clearly understand this. And for the last 4 months, the folks in Hong Kong have been sitting and not saying, okay, well, this has happened for 2 weeks, nothing is going on. They've pelted us with, rubber bullets. They've pelted us with freezing water. Let's go home. No, because they understand that the end game is to see change that is permanent change, that is going to now treat all the symptoms that they've been suffering from over time. And they said, look, in Chile, for example, it sparked because there was a raise in transport fare. But this was a symptom. The issue was that they saw that the money that should have been used for development, and also look at a country that was quite stable economically in the region, quite stable. But over time, they began to see, well, the leaders actually have taken the stability for granted as it would be, and started to put money in pockets where it shouldn't have gone, to put it rather lightly, and have said, look, we need to do something about this. So the spike in fares gave them then an opportunity to talk about the deep-seated issues. And they said, look, now we need to do something about this. So it's not necessarily just about the hike in fare, but to look at the deeper issue and say, now, for us to continue, because now the same railway that they were complaining about is now in ashes, burnt all around the city, from different cities, been burnt. But they said, we want to have a long-lasting change. It's not just about this a fare hike. It's about all the other things that will come as a result of the fact that there's corruption within the government.
Are you saying
that corruption is what we want to deal with?
I think it's the inequality, actually, that's the catalyst to a lot of these protests that we've seen, whether it's, okay, of course, in Hong Kong, it's more political protests. In Europe, the UK, Spain, and so on. It's been more climate change, sort of third generation human rights they're looking at. But when you look at the likes of Chile, Bolivia, and so on, yes, they were triggered off by these hikes, whether it's in transport and so forth. But what really came to the fore was the fact that there'd been a lot of inequality in the country. So the poor were feeling very oppressed. And it did lead to the government changing and retracting some of these hikes that they'd introduced. But the question is it going to lead to equality? So when you talk about prolonged demonstrations and bringing about change, I'm not sure that these demonstrations demonstrate your assertion today because, yes, the hikes went down or they were removed. I think some protests in Chile carried on.
They're still going on.
They're still going on. But how do you then, is it redistribution of wealth? Because it's inequality they're talking about. Even if they were to put policies in place to counter this inequality, it's still going to take time. Whereas with demonstrations, people want to see the results at least in their lifetime, so to speak. So it's an interesting one as to whether, you carry out long demonstrations over a long period of time, whether you will get the results you want. I think it depends on what you're demonstrating for. So, for instance, with climate change, you might be putting pressure on a government so that when it next designs policy, it takes it into account. But they're not going to reduce their emissions anytime soon. So the change and the impact is not felt immediately. With political change, we've seen with China, or rather with Hong Kong and them wanting to extradite prisoners back to China, that could be immediate in terms of the results they could get from it, but that's taking time. But with things like inequality, unless it then leads to a revolution and a complete change of power, it's a difficult one to achieve anything from, because inequality takes generations, I think, to recover from.
Yeah, and I think this is some of the things they took into consideration when these protests began. Because it's not to say that the protest, you'll be on the street for 6 months or whatever, and then you snap your fingers and then there'll be some kind of change. But that protest leads to the fact that conversations begin to happen and people begin to sit up and pay attention. And then you have protests. In many cases, we've seen where protests have actually led to the kind of revolution that we're talking about, and that people actually sit up and take notice and said, look, and like we said, the protest has now begun to move from the streets into parliaments, and people are having now saying, look, this is obviously something that, because the folks are not relenting, they are going to be in the streets, and that's what they've said. Because yes, we've seen the hike, but that's not the issue. The economic inequality is a big deal. The corruption that is taking place is a big deal, and until we see that this is being taken seriously at a higher level, and some people are ready to
what
sit
exactly
in for the long haul.
do they want to see? What would be indicative of
success?
Yes.
Well, I think when they see, things like opportunities in the hands of people who seem to be on the lower divide economically, more opportunities getting to them, then they begin to say, okay, it's then better for us. And that could be across the board, whether it's provision of resources at a certain level, from amenities that they need, from water to power, across the board.
Of
which are
these
some of the things
countries,
that they talked about.
are any of them oil producing, as in crude oil producing?
Not quite. But remember those protests as well in Venezuela, the collapsed government.
And
Major
Venezuela is an oil producing country. What about the other Latin American countries, Chile,
The Bolivians and Chile.
You see, the moment the bottom dropped on oil prices, the economies that were dependent on oil were definitely going to feel the pinch. Definitely. Because everything was going to change. Because that drop was severe, if you recall. But again, let me ask the question: what is it that they want to see exactly?
What's the measure of success? I think some of them, if they're looking for, and I go with what Nyeri was saying, some of these things are not going to be immediate. Some of what they expect to see, like, when talking about opportunities going to those that are underprivileged currently, those opportunities will not come directly, as a result of this, we say so.
Or immediately, and I think they realize that they're not going to come immediately, but they will be the conversation starters. They will be the catalyst by which you see some kind of conversation happening at a higher level for those who then have influence and power to actually do something about it. And that's what they wanted to do, because it had not happened before, whereby people were actually paying attention and say, hey, okay, they've never done it. They've never done this before. So it's time for us to sit up and take notice.
Okay, why don't we look at countries that have gone this route and sort of like stabilize? Let's start with Egypt, shall we? Mubarak was taken to jail. Muslim Brotherhood came in. Muslim Brotherhood went out.
Well, forced out, of course. The
Was
West,
overthrown.
The West didn't like that sort of democracy, so...
I'm not even discussing the West here. I'm just discussing what happened. And then LCC is now in power. Have they stopped complaining?
Oh, no. But in this case, what they said was that I think in this case, it was the devil that you know kind of situation, because LCC then came in with a lot of corrupt practices, according to the people, which they said, even this we are not going to accept. We don't like this kind of governance. The corruption is
Okay.
is
Why
is
don't
way
we
too much.
move from Egypt and just move a little to the right of Egypt or the left and look at, say, Syria? Let's look at some of those countries where they had some serious uprising. Let's look at Libya. Where did all these protests get the country to? They protested. They even had wars.
Well, in the case of, for example, now you see Libya, we have people in dire consequences, people who are seeking to leave the country. The economy is not doing as well. Syria is practically collapsed.
Well, it's,
When you're talking about all those people who are seeking to
zone
actually
for
move.
proxy wars, isn't it, Syria?
That's it.
So unfortunately, I think it has bigger fish to fry than sort of political demonstrations and so on, given what's going on in terms of its attacks. With South America, you can't help but question what America's interference might be. We know America has always sort of meddled with Latin America. This is America being the USA. So I know Trump has been quoted as being quite excited about Morales, Bolivia's leader, and the attempted coup there, and the military takeover, undemocratic as it was. You'll see somebody like Trump actually support that. So there is American interests there for sure. And just as with the Arab Spring and so on, we can't overlook the interference of the West. And that's perhaps why we say these protests work, because they're fueled by the West. We know, for instance, in Libya, of course, Gaddafi was taken out by the West. It wasn't his own people. We know during the Arab Spring, you did have Western interference, and this is why I was saying the Muslim Brotherhood came in as per elections, so they were voted in democratically, but the West were not happy with this because this is not an ideology that they look to promote globally, and so they were taken out, which is an interesting sort of scenario whereby democracy doesn't work out for the West as they would like it. What's interesting is why we Kenyans don't protest. Of course, inequality. I've talked about wealth disparity previously, whereby I think it's 1% own 99% of the wealth in this country. So the wealth disparity is there. It's glaring. You have slums set up next to very plush residential areas in Kenya. So it's not only economic, but it's very apparent and palpable. Why do we? Is it that we're a passive people? Why do we not go into these protests? Is
No,
it that
we have protested before. We have protested. When, in the protests of the 90s, it was a combination of all these things where, of course, what was told this was going to be the solution for all is a change of the constitution. That's going to bridge that inequality gap. It's going to make sure that everybody has something on their food on their plate.
Who
on
was
their table.
protesting in the 90s? Were those not students agitating for political change?
Okay, let's forget the 90s. In 2017, were those not protests?
Oh, the
After the
backlash
election.
from the elections.
Yes, were those not protests?
Those were more like riots. Okay, we had the the economic boycotts.
So
on-
where
on
do you
certain-
draw the line between a protest and a riot?
Well, there's usually violence as an ingredient in riots. You don't necessarily have that in protests. And also... No. Most protests
People are burning
peaceful.
railways, burning what? I mean, come
Chile.
on. And those are just
I
protests, they're not
think,
riots?
I think in terms of semantics, that's how I differentiate them. And also, with riots, usually there's clashing factors, not government. I think with protests, you're speaking directly to power. With riots, you can have different factions involved, I think.
The
be
riots
interesting
in
to see-
Paris, for example, those ones are all everybody
In terms of
speaking
definition.
against the government. Let's take a look at this when you come back. Let's first take a look at the situation on the road. It's 27 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is the situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation.
change
Spice-
today. Remember yesterday we had quite a lot of drama in the city, and so that meant that coming in and out was going to be a problem. Right now it is raining in certain parts of the city. Thika Road is already going to be slow because it's raining there. It was a heavy downpour at some point, but Kasarani Mwiki Road, we still have the problem there. We had protesters, interestingly enough, on the streets yesterday, and right now there's terrible traffic between Hunters and the maternity area. So definitely something needs to be done because of the poor state of the road, and it takes people a very long time to get where they're going. Let's see what happens today with that. Coming off Mombasa Road, traffic is not so bad right now, likely to increase as we get towards 7 o'clock. But let's see what happens on Outer Ring today. The bypass yesterday was terrible. As an option to get in and out of the city yesterday as well. Let's see what that looks like in a short while. For now, nothing much, but it is wet on some roads, so please be careful, and we'll let you know what to avoid and where to use in a short while. 0719012600 is the number to call. Call us if you see anything out of the ordinary, and we'll get you moving this Tuesday.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Remember, this show is on the radio and online, www.spicefm.co.ke. Also live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and YouTube. Our channel is Spice FM KE. Join the conversation as well on Twitter at Spice FM KE, and the hashtag is The Situation Room. At 25 minutes to 7 o'clock, the conversation in this hour is about protests globally, and Nduoko is telling us that protests around the world are adopting a longer stance approach. That protesters are believing that longer stay equals to meaningful change in protests.
Well, my thinking is that they work once you stay the course. Just look at what has happened in Chile over the last 4 months. And now, just after, between the time that they began and now, there's a promise of referendum next year, April 2020, as whether to replace the old constitution, which obviously was it came under the rulership of Augusto Pinochet. The results could see sweeping changes in education and social programs that have been the focus of discontent in Chile for years. Now, with the change of this constitution, then you see some change in what they've been talking about over time. And this has been as a result of the perseverance of the protesters in Chile. And they're saying, fine, let's deal with this, the hikes which were then brought down, the prices then again came down, but then let's go further and deal with these social programs that we're talking about. Let's go further and deal with these educational problems that we're talking about, or the programs and the changes that we want to see there. The only way to do that was then to bring about reforms as per the constitution, and they were on the streets for months. And now you see a referendum taking place in April 2020, something that would have never happened if they were not persistent in their ways.
Let's listen to a clip courtesy of Deutsche Welle.
Both Ecuador and Chile have seen intense anti-government protests. The demonstrations began after the presidents in each country made economic announcements, which in turn sparked a massive public outcry. But there are protests with similar motives happening all over the world as well. Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Colombia. Many of the crises stand out for being the most severe periods of turmoil in at least a decade. So, what do all these protests have in common? Experts say the answer may be inequality. People around the world are rising up against the growing gap between the rich or political elite and the poor. After all, many of those protesting are people who have long felt shut out of the wealth of their countries. In at least 4 cases, a rise in price for a key service had proven the final straw.
Right. So, I mean, just looking at what is happening around the world, definitely inequality between the rising gap between the rich and the poor, and then governments not taking the stance to make sure that there was provision of key services by the government that would spread across board. And let's look at the social programs that we spoke about, the educational programs that we talked about, making that or rather distributed equitably across the population. And so this is what they were looking for. Until the point, just Chile, case in point, they've been in the streets. They didn't say, oh, let's be in the streets for 2 weeks and then pack up shop and go. They've been there protesting regularly and saying, we are not moving until we get the result that we are looking for. And we've seen something, and that's what we said. The conversation has started. And then the conversation then is lifted from the streets into parliament to the point where you have a referendum as a direct result of this prolonged protesting in the streets. And then from there, you get to say, okay, based on what the people have said in referendum, then now we go ahead and make changes in the law as to how people's lives will be affected. And you can see a direct result of this prolonged protesting.
But
it works.
I don't
As
know
a
how it
glaring
will
example
work.
of how it works.
it's just a promise.
I don't know how it would work in terms of bridging the gap and that disparity between the poor and the rich. This is something that is going to take a while. I think these are some of the consequences of the excesses of capitalism. So it's system changes you're going to start to look at. So they can be stopgap measures, so they can reduce prices and remove these hikes on certain provisions that people need. But in terms of actually bringing about the sort of change they want, they're not going to get it, as I say, not in their lifetime. They might be a regime change if they push for that to topple the government and bring somebody else in. But even then, for people to really feel the effectiveness, it's not something that can happen overnight. I mean, how do you remove inequality? And as I say, this is a byproduct of capitalism. So it's a whole system, it's a whole mindset. I think that globally we're in, it's sort of the zeitgeist of today, isn't it? Capitalism and the wealth disparity. We see it in America, we see it everywhere. So I think what America has done, or some of these states have done, because they have the financial muscle to do so, there's a welfare system and a safety net for those that sort of are less fortunate, and they make sure that they provide the basic provisions. I think now America, whether or not you have insurance or if you can't afford insurance, they make sure you have the health care. Food is available. There's likes of food stamps, for instance. So this is how they mitigate against the backlash from the inequality. Now, some of these Latin American countries perhaps need to introduce a welfare system so that even if there is inequality of which capitalism forces this disparity, you'll find that people are still getting the basics. It's when they're not getting the basics. So some of these price hikes, they suggested or they would lead to people not being able to get the basics. So perhaps that would be the response here from
Which
the
is what
government.
they're asking for, and they cannot have some of these social or educational programs put in place without a change in the constitution or without a reform in the constitution, which is what they're asking for. If you then have a change in how the country is run and by the laws, then you will be able to see the introduction in some of these social programs that we're talking about, such
But
as
the
such
protesters
as a
really
welfare
understand
system.
that, when they're changing this, setup of their government, it's going to take time.
Of course, and I think they realize, they understand that, they've been in 50 odd years of this kind, and they say that we don't want to remain here. Is it going to take another 25, 50 years to change? And they're ready for that because it's something that they don't want to see, whether it's not going to be something that they see in their lifetime, but they understand that the sacrifice that they're making today is going to change somebody's life in the future. And had they sat down with their hands under them and said, okay, well, this is the situation and there's nothing we can do about it, then you wouldn't see the kind of change. The government officials would be very happy remaining with the status quo. But here they are being forced to change because of the agitation felt by the masses. And they say, look, we are agitated. We are going to agitate for that change on a higher level. And because of that, you will see a change. I mean, it will be interesting to see what April 2020 brings about.
What happens there?
Yeah, what happens
thereafter.
there. If they go to referendum and see that some of this constitutional reform will take place, then you will see the introduction of some of these social programs that will then put, you have access to services at the hands of people. And that's what they're complaining about now.
And that's what they want.
This is what they want.
I'm still not bought into the premise of your argument this morning that, longer protests are going to have longer lasting results or better impact.
If you sat in the street for 2 weeks and then they lower the hike of they lower the price of fuel, what have you done? You've lowered the price of fuel, but then something else is going to come up. You're going to put out this fire here, and then there's a geyser that pops up here, and then there's something else that pops up somewhere else. But if you have something changed in the law, something about how the country is run to stop some of these things from popping up in the future. That's what I'm talking about.
What I'm
to
saying-
stay longer for longer change, to me, makes sense.
What I'm saying is that the political class actually understands. It's what I was discussing as that virus or bacteria that has gotten so used to this kind of drug that it's become resistant. So
Resistant to the point that they want to make some change in the government, then I think that's a good thing.
you know what they do? So they see that you're out in the streets, so they wait you out. They say, all right, 2 weeks, let's give you something small. Then you continue protesting, then they promise to do something by August 2020. For you to
April.
go back home, April 2020, right? For you to go back home. This is what the governments are doing.
But they haven't.
Look at
You
the
see, that's the thing. They've not gone back home. There is a promise of referendum in 2020, but they're still in the streets.
and they're not going to be on the streets until 2020. Are they saying
You would be
that's what they wanna do?
surprised. You would be surprised.
Because looking at Lebanon, for instance, as well, they've been protesting. They're tired of their garbage and all their garbage in their country. But the government just looks at them and sees, well, yeah, you guys can stay there as we continue doing what we want to do.
So,
So
maybe
if they're making any
protests-
changes, they're just making small piecemeal changes. It's not that they're saying, all right, you guys, so you have raised the point and we see the direction you're heading. Come in, let's sit down and let's have a conversation as a country.
But that's
moving
what they
forward.
have said. This is what I'm saying.
That's not what they're doing.
No,
They're
that's what
saying-
they have done. They've said, come and let us talk about this and let us see what we can do. And that is why you have talks of referendum. The talks of referendum would
This
not
is
have...
in Chile.
Yes, this is in Chile as
All
an
right.
example.
Bolivia, Lebanon.
I don't know. I'm giving the example
Hong
of Chile
Kong.
as what has happened. And you can see, if you even one example is enough. You gave the example yesterday of one example being enough. One example is enough to show you that such a thing can happen in the way in which it has been carried out.
Are these protests disruptive enough, I think, is the question. That's what would give us the answer as to how long they can go on for. So do they cause enough economic disruption, for starters, or political disruption? So perhaps in Chile, you'll find that absolutely it interferes with the economies. And maybe in Hong Kong, China's economy is not particularly moved by sort of protests, and they can withstand the political protests and upheaval for a lot longer. Of course, with China, what was important was their good name on the global platform. That's been heavily tarnished by the media, painting China, of course, again, as the evil, undemocratic people that they are. Interestingly, I want to bring this back to Kenya because I think it's important. There are some similarities and parallels I can draw from some of these countries, especially when you talk about inequality, because that is what is driving a lot of these protests around the world. But I think what you'll find is different. Of course, there's the dominoes effect in these regions. So one region, one country starts and it picks up in the next country. So you've seen that in Latin America and perhaps with the Arab Spring. In Kenya, is it the fact that we're not united that we don't protest? Because the wealth disparity you'll find in Kenya is probably larger than that of the wealth disparity in Chile. And if we can agree that it's the inequality that is the driver of these protests, why is it we don't get to a point in Kenya? Yes, we have protests, usually organized by donor funding, sadly. So it's never our agenda. It's never driven by us. Why is it we haven't gotten to a place where we're protesting? There's some countries that protest corruption. Of course, I mentioned some Western countries are protesting climate change, but that's not where we are yet. We're still at the inequality and corruption stage. Why is it? Is it because we're not united? We're otherwise divided, tribally divided, that is? Is it because we can't afford to, that we live hand to mouth and people must go to work, so they don't have the time to protest? What is it? Is it because the class divide here is not just a dichotomy, i.e. the poor and the rich, and that there's a middle class, lower middle class, and so forth, so they can't unite from a class perspective to come against the political elite and demand change? Why is it we don't protest to that level?
We haven't reached that point.
Of what?
Of the tipping point.
When you say we don't protest, what do you mean exactly?
We haven't seen the protests
I think she's
that
talking
we've
about
seen in Bolivia, in Chile, in Lebanon. We haven't
the
seen
volume of people, the number of
in
days,
terms of
We have.
the intensity.
Okay.
We have.
When did we see this?
Second liberation,
was all about that.
yes, there was plenty of that. In fact, there was nothing else but that. And it was all over. It wasn't just in one place. There were protests all over the country. So it's not that we haven't seen it, we have.
I don't think it's been to the extent when I look at the numbers. I mean, I was alive in the second liberation, so I remember it quite clearly. it was nowhere near the masses that we're seeing on the streets. It did not take. If anything, I remember there was some agitation, primarily university students. It was, of course, a push for political freedom.
No.
It's just like if you went to any of these countries, you'll find the youth, and this youth come from colleges and universities, but it doesn't mean that they are the drivers of that of the protests.
In fact, for the longest time, the protests in Hong Kong, it has featured young people.
Yep.
Now that has changed. Now you have professionals, you have the elderly, and you have the youth. They are all in the street.
Did we have that in Kenya, where you had old people, you had women
Yes.
on the
Yes.
streets?
Yes.
Where you had marches, protests?
yes.
Were they disrupted by government?
What time period was this in Kenya?
In the 90s.
The 90s, and
Okay.
and they were timed. It was almost every Friday, every Saturday. It was there, and people went out, and not just in Nairobi. It was all over the country. Yes.
And you had this level of
It was
participation.
countrywide, not this level, not
No.
not to millions of
Actually,
people.
Eric,
but we had many people.
the
in
thing
every-
you must understand is the time factor. This is the 90s. How many decades later?
Right. What was the agitation? This is very
Change.
interesting. Because
Multi-party.
Right. Okay. So it was there was
Multi-party.
agitation
Yes.
for change in
Multi-party.
in the
Of course, that
political
was, of
system.
course, driven also by the West. So we have to look at
Multi-party.
Western interference in our political culture as well. And similarly, I said this for Latin America. So
But the
do we
people-
need
pe-
Western
pe-
interference in
people
order
were
for
also-
us to
I
change
think
politically?
the West was
or
aiding, but the West was not necessarily the one that was.
what do you mean by aid? Elaborate on that. Because
They were assisting.
By
They were assisting.
assisting.
they were
Right.
assisting.
They were supporting, but the demonstrators themselves were not being paid by anybody.
No, you don't
They were
have
not
to.
appearing
You
there
don't have to
because they were
pay
being
individual
addressed by anyone.
demonstrators.
Individuals
you
who
can
are
introduce
coming
and
out-
push for ideologies and for people to pick up certain concepts.
But
pay university
resonates
lectures
with
to
people.
drive
but
certain
some
ideologies.
of the people who were
It
leading these
resonates with people.
protests were actually considered to be eastward leaning. So where was the influence of the West in all this?
Eastward in terms of
Russia,
communist. Yeah.
communism, yes, socialism.
Right.
Yes. These people were many of these protesters were actually considered
The
to
bearded
to-
sisters.
Yes, to be socialist leaning, not Western leaning as you are postulating.
Okay, I
Yes.
think in terms of from an economic framework to run the country, yes, they were probably more socialist, having studied in Russia and communist. But
No.
From a political perspective,
Jerry, they
it was
didn't
the
study
West,
in Russia again.
or East Germany, wherever
No,
it
they
was.
actually didn't.
So where were their Eastern leanings coming from?
It is what they were
It
labeled
wasn't-
as.
It wasn't the counterparts of the airlift that took the certain people to America.
No,
and they came back with those
no,
ideologies.
no.
Right.
With the exception of someone like Raila Odinga, who studied in Germany, everybody else who was considered the bearded had studied in this country. Yes.
So where were their Eastern leanings coming from?
It was the government view of the protests that they had. In fact, the government was Western. It was supported by the West, so to speak. Yes. So
We'll come back to that. The Moy's government was supported by the West?
Yes, it was.
No, you'll find a lot of the push for multi-party democracy was actually by the West. The structural adjustment programs were forcefully imposed by the West. Moy's government was not supported by the West.
The
That would be lying.
duplicities, the
They
duplicity.
did not abandon it either.
Yes, the duplicitous
At one
nature of the
point, there was
West.
sanctions, and we were having to rely
That's not
on
abandoning the
ourselves.
government.
No, it's not. It's
That
just
is
changing
abandoning the
goalposts.
government. When we can't borrow from the World Bank, when the IMF, we can't interact with them, that is abandoning the government.
Let's come back to the conversation. It's 9 minutes to 7 o'clock. What we're discussing this morning is protests around the world. And Nduoko is saying 2019 protests are seeming to be longer lasting and people are seeking longer lasting solutions. And it's working, like in the case of Chile. So we have this clip from Deutsche Welle, which we played initially, and we have a second part of it. It's talking about the impact of those protests around the world. And then I'm going to open up the phone lines, 0719 012 600 for you to contribute.
In Ecuador, that final straw was rising petrol prices. In Iran, gas prices were also the tipping point that got people outside and on the streets. In Lebanon, it was a tax on internet calls, like those made via WhatsApp. In Chile, a 3.75% fare hike was announced for the public transit system. A slowing global economy and a youth bulge in many countries has produced a new generation that's frustrated. According to the International Labour Organization, 44% of young people of working age are either unemployed or working jobs that don't pay enough to escape poverty. And an increase in youth unemployment is one of the best predictors of social unrest.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice Up and Right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
7 minutes to 7 o'clock. So phone lines are open 0719 012 600. Also, you can comment on Facebook, Spice FM KE. Tag us on Twitter at Spice FM KE. Longer lasting, elongated protests. The solution.
The solution? Perhaps the solution. But I think also something that's very important and very interesting, because Jerry asked, why is it then that we don't protest? Or
We do protest.
I'm just looking at that question a little bit more. And I think that when you have, whether Kenya does or doesn't, but when you have people united around a common cause, agitated enough to want to see some kind of change, that's why you will see some of the protests that we see, around the world and in different areas. And then people are willing to pay the price of that. And so then you ask the question, how tired are we? If you look at the corruption and thievery in Kenya, for example, how, are Kenyans agitated enough to want to say this has got to stop, to ask them for some kind of change or to ask for some kind of action against what we see? When people then coalesce around this common cause, around this goal, that is, and are upset enough to do something about it. And you'll often find that people will not protest because they're just not upset enough.
They're not upset enough.
To the point whereby you say, look, this is enough. And all of us are united on that.
Phone lines are open 0719 012 600. Let's hear from Eric in Kisumu. Good morning.
Morning to you, sir. How are you?
Very well, thank
Good morning.
you. Yes. I'm a keen listener of your program every morning.
Asante sana.
And I wanted to contribute on this idea of protest. Given that we are a multi-religious society, and when you look at the protest in these other countries that are really thriving in protest and trying to overturn their governments, they do it every other Friday when they have that mass assembly. So they do it, it's a protest after the church or after coming from the mosques. So it is easier for them to come together and then hold a protest. But to us, unless we come from that lower class, which we feel are more like pressed and oppressed, that is when we shall come together and go to the streets, but not for politics. Yes.
It's interesting in this because when you look at inequalities and you look at the economic lack that some people have, it knows no religion, and it is across board. Whether you're looking at Egypt from Chile, where you have large Roman Catholic population, and you have some Muslims there as well, and you have also a lot of traditional believers. Just looking at Chile, for example, even looking at Egypt, where you have a mix and match between Christian and Muslims, people who are getting into the streets. So this kind of inequality that we're talking about, interestingly enough, knows no religion. People getting tired enough because the food that you put in the hand or not put in the hand of a Christian is the same that you would not or put in the hand of a Muslim. And they saw this across the board.
The caller was referring to the fact that with these religions, you then have gatherings and sort of a structure through which people can come together. I think in Kenya also the media has played a role in sort of diffusing some of our political or economic frustrations, because you get the sense that you can have a platform to vent, and you do see people come, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on platforms, come and represent your views against the government. So the free media actually diffuses some of those frustrations because people can complain. And we do come on these platforms and complain, and some people feel, well, at least I'm being represented. There's no pent-up frustrations that can explode into protests or can be harnessed into protests by a large group of people. I think the media does play a role in diffusing that frustration.
On the other hand, media could also be helping to fuel and propel those kind of frustrations. Because you see, like in Iran and other places where you've seen Twitter actually being the tool that's being used to mobilize
in Egypt,
people.
It was what sparked it all.
Well.
Right, absolutely.
As a tool, but what I'm talking about here is as an outlet for people. The fact that we have a free media, I think it gives us an outlet. Whether real or perceived an outlet, or
Do you think
whether it's
KOT
actually
feel that they're
false.
protesting on their keyboards?
Or that
I
they've
think
been
you
heard?
find a lot of people, once, I mean, I don't think KOT could come together and actually protest and bring about change
No, I
on
don't
the
think so.
streets, but they do put pressure on government.
They can.
You find
Kenyans on Twitter.
Who is KOT?
Kenyans on Twitter. It's like Erasmus, but okay.
KOT, I think they have put enough pressure. We've seen a lot of things, government react to quite a few things as a result of what I would call protests on KOT.
But remember, social media affords someone something very rare. It gives you airtime, it gives you a sense of importance. You post something, people respond. You have an audience. So Nyeri actually is spot on that one. You actually get to a point where you are relevant. This is the thing about social media.
But also it gives you a platform to vent. That's very important. If you have restrictions on the media, you will find that this can actually lead to the sort of protests that we see.
I think it's not unique to Kenya. I mean, the use of social media. If you look at all these countries that are protesting now, they have access and good access to social media. Apart from those countries, we are demonstrating because their access to social media is being restricted.
The protests in
you know
Egypt
what
alone, people got clarion call to go out into the streets, and they were spreading this information with social media.
But remember,
And it starts on
please,
social media. It's fueled on social media.
Go slightly back. How long had Mubarak been president of Egypt?
3 decades.
Precisely.
But
So-
this particular one, because of using social media, then they were able to galvanize,
What I'm
to
trying
come
to
together.
say is, if you're talking about something that had been building, 3 decades is enough time for it to really cook, isn't it? Okay. So, and what it also meant was that they were repressive. So some of the freedoms we speak of were probably not available.
We're not there.
No.
0719-012-600. Join the conversation. Also post on Facebook and Twitter at SpiceFMKE. Good morning, 7 o'clock.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice
Get
up
an
your
instant
life.
penalty on Mombasa Road if you don't wake up early. Unfortunately, if there's a slight delay getting onto that road, you see in a matter of 20 minutes, the traffic has already built up, and it was flowing about 20 minutes ago, but not so much anymore. Understand also that there are slight showers on Mombasa Road, so that is going to contribute to some traffic that we're going to see in the next 20 minutes or so. Ngong Road already building up, especially around the Dagoretti corner, and trying to get past that to the City Mortuary roundabout will not be very easy in a short while, because everybody's moving now at the same time. On the Thika Road, remember, we still have the backlog from the Mwiki area because of the poor state of the roads, and that is still affecting traffic and movement this morning. Coming off of the Eastern Bypass, trying to use that as an option to get onto and off of Mombasa Road might be better today compared to what we saw yesterday. So let's have a look and see in a short while how that plays out for us. Moving out of the city, remember, if you are planning on traveling, the roads are still quite flooded. The rain let up for a short while, but not today. So please be careful as you move. 0719-012-600. Give us a shout, send us a message on Twitter. Let's see what it looks like.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
So we went to take a look at the traffic on the back of what we're discussing, social media and the use of social media either to fuel or to quell rising public temperatures and anger.
I mean, just looking at when we're talking about Kenya and the culture in terms of how you express, in terms of how Kenyans express themselves, and yes, social media is used as one major channel of that, expressing yourself and actually kind of agitating. Now, imagine if that freedom was taken away.
You know, one of the things.
If it was taken away, then you would, I think, see a greater kind of agitation. Now, what we're saying is that what does it take to be pushed to that point whereby it's not just behind the keyboard anymore or behind your mobile phone? It's a safe place, we also must understand, because behind my phone where I'm able to agitate, how much more would I push that if I was actually forced, as it were, to go into the streets?
You know what is common is that there are protests, but the reasons may not be the same. In Latin America, we lump Latin America and say Bolivia, Chile, and we say disparity in wealth. It's not entirely true, really, because if you look at a country like Bolivia between the years 2006 and 2019, the GDP quadrupled. Not increased, quadrupled. And the extreme poverty rate declined from 38 to 18%. Yet, there were protests. Okay, so the disparity there. Now, Chile, actually, if you look at the GDP, it's more.
It's the most sustainable economy in the region.
Yes, it is. It is something like almost 3 times the size of that of Bolivia. But in this country, you could say there's disparity. Their population is almost a third of ours. Now, when you talk about protests, we know the issues in Hong Kong because they've been highlighted over and over and over and over and over, isn't it? Now, the issues surrounding some of these Latin American countries or the Arab Spring, again, if you look at them, you'll find the reasons why they were protesting. Protests, similarity. Reasons not necessarily the same.
Yeah, but protest as a channel of then expressing these issues that you have. It is the tool.
Actually,
the protests are
I'm
the
actually
tool.
going somewhere with this. I am saying that protests can be protests for protest's sake. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Some people just be.
Well, we are unhappy. We are going to protest.
What are they unhappy about?
Well, I don't know. They could
That's
be
what
unhappy
they're
about many
protesting
things.
about.
Yes.
Or they may
You
not
see,
have a structure for it.
Yes,
With a proper reason, and this is what we are seeking as an outcome.
And this seems to be a good way of dealing with it. Let's meet at a square and protest.
No, I think it's a good way of getting heard. It's a good way of getting heard because sitting behind,
let me ask the
sitting in
question.
your home is not going to get the person
agree.
who is going to make a decision
So then-
about this to hear you.
So what do we hear?
You hear the noise, and so at some point there's going to be some attention paid to that noise and say, okay, we either want to stop this noise or we want to know the reason behind this noise, and then let's do something about it so that this noise will not return.
We are assuming that people don't know the reason behind the noise.
Well, of course they know the reason, but here you are and you have somebody saying, I want something to change. And you know what?
I think that's where the crux of the matter is.
That is it.
If
because a
people
lot
are
of
clear
times
on
people
what they want,
and
apart
they
from
come
what
out and
they're
they say,
complaining about.
I can know what you want, but until I can know what you want, and I'm just going to maintain the status quo in terms of doing something about
may know
it
what I'm unhappy
as somebody in a
about,
position,
but
and
you
then
may not
I
know
decide
exactly
not
what
to
I
change
want.
it. Exactly. You may know that I'm unhappy. You don't know what I want. So here I am going to sit until you come and tell me, until you agitate to the point whereby you say, look, this is what I want, and this is the demand that I'm making. And then now what you do is that you open up the table for discussion.
And I think City is heading somewhere with this, where he's saying, yes, so people could be protesting, people could be feeling unhappy or dissatisfied with something. But unless they have a proper, concrete response to what they are agitating
They're
over,
going to continue protesting.
they'll just be sitting there and the government will look at them and say, all right.
Let them protest.
Let them protest. This is where the leadership of those protests comes in. If there's an organizer, proper leadership, which is saying, this is what we want out of our presence on the streets.
Take an
Then
example
you get it.
of Ukraine, all right? It's usually a good example because, one, they would protest in the evening, they'd go home. And they realize change isn't going to come this way.
Nope.
So what do?
You stay in the streets.
Precisely. And other people, yes. Now, did Ukraine change? Yes. Did they get what they wanted? Yes.
Because of the
Yes.
persistent.
Did it take they were clear. Did it
They
take a
were
very
clear.
long time? No.
They were clear.
It didn't take a very long time. And there were changes. Distinct, clear. And the changes have remained.
but there was a change in the way in which they protested. I mean, you've just said it
Yes.
yourself. They started by coming like they were going to class. We protest and then we go home in the evening and go back to the comforts of our beds. And then they
But
realized
they were clear.
that it's going to take a bit longer and for us to do something differently, for people to then sit up and take notice.
Look at Hong Kong, for instance. What did they start by doing? They started by occupying the airport. They weren't disrupting it. They just interfering in the process. It has since evolved. The unfortunate thing is people have since died. Right? It keeps growing. All right? Now, does it look like mainland China is about to move? They don't look like they're about to move.
They're unfazed.
Yes.
But is the leadership clear on what they want?
And are they,
The message is
are they
clear.
continuously they are clear.
But they're stating it. That's what you're asking.
Yes. You see, one of the things that, again, is true about protests, there are places where it'll work and it'll achieve the desired end. But in places, it may not achieve exactly what you want. Maybe one needs to revise the method of protest.
The approach.
Yes.
Deal with, look at it from that point. Know that this government is immune to certain
activities.
Yeah, certain activities. So yeah, if you have a couple of people who go to Huru Park on 2 days a week, for the
Nobody's
next
gonna
3
pay
months,
attention to you, that's
they'll
for
be like,
sure.
all right, yeah. So just go to Huru Park for the next 3 months. But if the population starts rising and you start getting thousands of people going to Huru Park on those 2 days
Trust
every
me,
month,
somebody's going to sit up
then
and
they
take
start
notice. Yeah.
taking notice.
Why don't we give
It can
a
also
live-
be
yes.
hijacked by the same government by just saying, all right, so you guys have come. They notice 100,000 people. Come, let's talk.
End of
and then
story.
they diffuse you. Yet you did not have a clear agenda on what you wanted out of your protests.
Why don't you look at protests that are common in this country? They're called strikes. Doctors have it, teachers have it, nurses have it, clinical officers. Everybody has it. The only people who haven't had it are prison officers, the police, and the army. Okay, but everybody else goes on strike. How effective are they? These are organized, and we know what it is they're agitating for.
No, somebody will come and say, okay, we'll have
Let's
a
sign a
CBA, and then we'll be.
And they do sign a CBA.
We'll give
return
you
to
some
work
money. There will
formula.
be some
And they have a return
arrears.
to work formula.
You keep people quiet for a short period of time, and then after a while, they realize that they were hoodwinked, and they say, "Okay, folks, this can't work."
But
Let's go
again,
back to the
let's
street."
ask the question, were they actually hoodwinked? You see, right now, we're talking about a situation where we're saying our government is broke. Could they have been broke for a much longer period than we realize? Because why would the government not pay what they wanted to pay if they actually had the money?
They didn't have the money in the first place.
Do you say they didn't? They didn't, or
No,
they did?
They didn't.
They didn't.
Or in some cases, they actually do have the money, but they don't have the will. Because they know if we start paying these guys and they go out there and they say, yes, this is what we negotiated for and we're getting it, then everybody else goes to the streets and they expect their demands will also be met. Same way.
It's a vicious cycle, yes, and it's a way of actually promoting inflation. But the truth of the matter is that it looks like the solution that the government likes. I don't even think the government minds the strikes. Not really. Because they have a formula which they know works. In previous governments, you didn't bother with the strike, you just bothered the leaders of the strike.
Yeah. Deal with the people and that's it.
And that's it. And they would diffuse the situation for you.
Are you saying that it would be better if, for example, let's say doctors went on strike today and they're demanding, certain issues, and they went and had a return to work formula, that they should stay on the streets until that is fully implemented, and then when it's fully implemented, then now that's why they say success, ticked all the boxes, let's go back to work.
No, I mean,
The
I'm
impact
saying,
of a longer lasting, drawn out protest.
well, in some cases, I would see that working. Unfortunately, what has happened in the past is that there's a promise that has been made, and then it works for a short period of time, and then people take that as bird in hand as opposed to two in the bush, and they say, okay, well, at least we've gotten this far. Let's go back and continue until we can do the rest. But in terms of but you find that then they come back later and they say, we'll go on strike again because the promise that you made to us initially did not work. I don't think I would ask them in that case to stay on the street after a promise has been made and you actually see the evidence of such being
The only evidence is
established.
implementation. It just as return to work formula and signing of a CBA Those are just promises.
Yeah, well, I think you
And
get. I mean, it sounds radical to say it, but you get to the point where somebody's going to make you promises, and you know that they have the ability to do such. Then you need to do what you need to do if you are serious enough about your agenda. And I think that's the thing. You have people who are quite serious about the agenda that they have, in terms of how deliberate they are and focused they are to get it through. That's something totally different. But to get to the point where they're agitated enough, that's why you see people in the street for 6 months, 4 months, 3 months. That's why. People have had it.
Somebody's asking what happens when people are, agitated about a state of roads, for example, and then they go and plant bananas and burn tires on the roads. What action is taken, and what action do they want?
Well, I mean, look at it yesterday, for example, in the Mwiki Kasarani area. You had, what you would call protesters. Okay, maybe they're about 20 or 25, but they said, look, nobody's using this road today, and that's why we had the terrible traffic situations that we saw yesterday, and people began to burn tires on the street. You had police who came to the area to try and clear them off, and you had some tear gas that was thrown every now and then. Is the road going to be fixed? Not today.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily today. Was that the way to go about it? Maybe those who were protesting
should they stay there until the road is fixed?
I think I would go with what CT said in this case, a more focused approach to doing this, because burning tires is not going to in this case, it's not going to solve the situation. It's not going to get the road fixed. But is there another way in which this could have come through? Probably.
Let's pick this call. This is Esther calling in from Mombasa. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning, Esther.
Fine, thank you.
Morning.
I'm fine. We are not flooding anyway.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I have a contribution to make about protesting in our country.
Yes.
I think, first of all, we have not matured to that extent or aware in our mind that protesting is good. We have always thought protest is a negative thing. Like when you protest, there is a problem and we need that problem solved. I think there is also positive protest where you need change. I like what the lady said. When you're really tired of something, you really need that thing to be changed. And who is to change it? The leaders are to change it, or the specific institution or whatever is supposed to change it. So for me, protest, we have really not matured. And what we have seen before is reactive. Like we react, like the gentleman said, we react to something like a strike. So once it's over, we demand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the leaders said, okay, come, let's sit down and reason. And okay, ndio hii ama hatuna. But we have to grow up, think if we have not been given or we've not received the delivery we want as Kenyans. And I think it starts by who we choose. If you choose the wrong guys, you cannot go protesting to them. They'll just be like, our sasa ni kina nani mnaambia. You need mature leaders, put them there and then put them to task so that when you go to protest to them, they know, actually these guys were coming. But if you put the wrong people in those offices, hata protest mpaka kesho, they'll just sit as a strike. And even God says, bana, if you have issues, kuja tuonge. I mean, if God can do that, these guys can actually grow to that extent. So
right.
I think even our politicians, when they protest, and I don't know whether when they protest and demand things, they should ask themselves, who are they demanding them from? Have they reinvented those people? Ama they're the same people? They'll never get any results. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Esther.
you, Esther.
Well, she raises very pertinent points. It's about also the leadership that you have.
It really is. I mean, think about it like a baby. You'll see a baby will cry for certain things. Diaper needs to be changed. Baby needs to be fed. So you want to pick up the baby and comfort the baby. That baby will cry and cry and cry until you do something to change that status. You may carry them and comfort them for some time, but if you're not dealing with the issue, they're going to keep crying. So until you get to the point whereby you are agitated enough to make as much noise until a change comes about, and to do that in a deliberate way, focused, that somebody will do something about your problem, then unfortunately, it's not going to yield much results.
The conversation continues on our social media handles, Spice FM KE on Facebook, at Spice FM KE on Twitter, and the hashtag is The Situation. Remember, we're live streaming as well on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Good morning, this is Spice FM, Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, at 17 minutes after 7.
24/7 around the world non-stop. This is Spice FM.
Sleeping tips brought to you by Superfoam. Get on a schedule. Did you know that going to bed around the same time each night, you will wake up at around the same time each morning? If you're a napper, limit the naps to one 30-minute nap a day. A nap any longer will cause you trouble falling asleep later that night. This message was brought to you by Superfoam. Superfoam. We are good in bed.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
It's 18 after 7. Thank you very much for choosing Kenya's biggest conversation. This is a Situation Room, broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We're in Mombasa, 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, and Malindi, 97.7. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, Nduoko, Jerry Thorne. My name is Eric Latif. Yesterday, we saw the governor of Nairobi, Mike Mbuvi Sonko, taken to court. He, of course, pleaded not guilty to a number of counts relating to corruption, and he was being represented by what we call a battery of lawyers, of course being led by lawyer Cecil Miller, assisted by Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., MP Dan Maanzo, other lawyers John Keith, George Keithy, Nelson Harvey, Kwayambuya, Alphonse Mutinda, Kenyanjui, Mangolo, Philip Kandu, many of them. But then the conversation that started immediately was when people saw the presence of three legislators there representing the governor, and the question started emerging. So these are the legislators, especially the senators, who should be oversighting the operations of the county government. Those county governments across the country, those are the ones who summon governors to come and answer to certain questions, especially on how they're operating and how they're running their offices. And then those are the same people who are going to represent them in court when the same governors are accused of abusing their office by the DPP and the EACC. So the question emerges, why is it that you would see somebody who is being paid by taxpayers to oversight and to ensure that the county governments are actually working for the benefit of the taxpayer, then going to represent somebody who is being accused of going against what the taxpayer should be getting? Of course, the question emerges. These people are lawyers in their own right. Should they continue practicing law? Should they be barred from practicing law just because you've elected them into Parliament or the Senate? What is right? What is wrong? This conversation is not new. Remember, we had the Senator Jim Orengo, who has gone to court twice. Once he was representing Busia Governor Sospito Jamong. The other time was just recently when he was representing Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu in court. Of course, the questions emerged. Why are we seeing this? And I am saying this morning that what we see is wrong. It is dishonesty by elected leaders at the expense of taxpayers, and these particular senators should be censured in Parliament for their actions. For this action, which is going to represent, taking up a private brief and going to represent a governor.
Do our laws prohibit
Is there any
them?
kind of prohibition that
None.
is
It's
brought
on a moral
about because
ground.
of this? Right.
Remember, let's juxtapose this, shall we? For the longest time, there was this issue of if you're a medical doctor and you worked for the government, you actually could be in private practice. So they tweaked it and said, no, you can. You can be licensed to actually have your own clinic. They're reversing it now as we speak, but that has been the status quo for the longest time. And part of the reason was the issue of pay. People said, when you work for the government, it's like you've taken a vow, not of celibacy, but of poverty, because your colleagues who are in private practice will be doing well and making good their profession, while you, in the service of mankind, will be dwindling in poverty. Now, if we're saying it's a moral issue, this one is similar. a moral issue. Should doctors who work for the government, should they actually be licensed to have private practice, and should they actually do both? There are those who argue that they've abused this privilege.
It just looked, I think, on the face of it, it just looked extremely, and it does bear with it some weirdness when you try to say the very people who've been put at the forefront of fighting this kind of thing. I mean, they are the ones essentially would ask questions county to county and say, how is it that you spent your money? What we're trying to do is curb looting, across all levels. And then here you have, be he your colleague or whomever, here you have somebody who then has been charged with the very thing that you have been mandated to safeguard, and then you are defending him, as it were. So on the face of it, actually then brings about some funny sentiment when then where do we then draw the line?
Is there conflict of interest?
Or if you ask yourself, then public servants, should they then, take on this kind of representation, especially when it flashes in the face of, what it is that they're supposed to be doing?
Why don't we take it further? Should civil servants be involved in businesses?
No, well, the BBI is going to actually ask that stops,
Well, I mean, it's the same
recommendation
sort of,
by the BBI.
The Constitution is quite express, actually. Article 77, restriction on activities of state officers. And in Section 1, it says a full-time state officer shall not participate in any other gainful employment. And I think the reason they say this is because they envisaged scenarios such as we're seeing with Mutula Kalonzo and Murkomen. Murkomen, of course, also has political interests with Sonko being said to be a Tanga guy, but that's neither here nor there, and it's a discussion for another day. But I think a provision like this in the Constitution was to ensure that we don't come to such an absurdity as we see now, whereby the Senate, who will actually be questioning Sonko and should be acting as an oversight body, you have members of the Senate, powerful members of the Senate, in Murkomen especially, representing the man. You can see a conflict of interest. How can you be interrogating somebody whom you're simultaneously defending in court? You can see them compromising the nature of the interrogation, for instance. Of course, with Sonko, you also have cheap lawyers like Nelson Harvey going for the money and so on. So, of course, they're allowed to.
And
they're allowed to do it.
No, excuse me. I mean, why is
which
it?
lawyer is not doing it for the
No.
money?
I think the reason I hit out at Harvey is if you looked on the internet, on Twitter, you'd have seen just a couple of weeks ago when we had Kipchoge running, he said, we do need a balance in this country. We have evil like Sonko, and then we have really great things like Kipchoge, and that's how the scales are balanced. So you can see there, it's not that he's supporting him for any political reason. It's not that he's supporting him from a personal perspective. It's purely sort of for the money.
Lawyers represent murderers.
Absolutely, of course.
They represent people who have done
everybody
the worst
has a
possible
right.
things to the planet.
Everybody has a right to be represented. Now back to the
Does
Senate
it make
and
them
that
cheap?
question. Yes, having sort of gone against him publicly, because this is political in nature. You can't deny that.
That was
fact.
before he got the brief.
And this is
Yes.
that was before. No, I think he threw himself into that.
You get the brief, and then you're like, all right. So
It's a brief.
I see the circumstances. Let me hear you
This
out,
is
and then
my
you're like,
opinion,
oh,
of course.
I actually thought, or whatever, or maybe he knows whatever he knows, but he knows he has to conduct himself professionally. Well, back to the issue anyway.
No, I actually take exception. You see, when you refer to something as cheap, if you'd said questionable, cheap is strong.
It's a strong one.
Lack of a better word, I use it colloquially, so give it a broad interpretation, if you will. So yes, I think the Constitution did envisage a scenario such as this,
and it
I
says
think
full-time public officers should not engage in other private business.
Yes, a full-time state officer should not participate in any other gainful employment. So perhaps they could do some pro bono work.
Unless this is just that, pro bono and support of their friend.
But that could be
But
said
still.
to be gainful, because I don't think they mean economically gainful. I suppose it could expand to mean even social capital. If you're gaining that, if you're gaining recognition, that's considered gainful employment. So yes, definitely the Constitution is quite clear, and this is a clear violation of the Constitution. They themselves as lawyers should know this.
Where I see it is this issue, and some of them were asking yesterday, why didn't you raise this when we've seen it before? We saw Senator Orengo representing Sospita Ojamong, Governor Busia, taken to court on corruption charges, and a senator who is one of those who should be watching that the funds are being utilized properly in the counties, is representing him in court, right? And it's not the first time. We also saw again when the DCJ was charged in court by the DPP on issues of corruption and abuse of office. Same senator again going to court. Now, yesterday we're seeing these two senators plus an MP. We've also seen other MPs appearing, taking brief for clients on these other matters. Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line
No,
between
and just because
saying
an
that
illegality has been let to pass previously, it doesn't mean we should follow that precedent.
And use it
We
in
should
the
correct
future.
it as soon as we should, as soon as we can. Perhaps nobody, there was no interest for anybody to actually bring this up or to fight it or contest it and point out the unconstitutional nature of this representation. But clearly now there is, given the magnitude of the person.
But
or
are senators
the
government officials?
The sentiments we're dealing
States.
with. They're state officials, yes.
There's a debate there, isn't there?
states?
Right.
Remember, this same debate came about when we were talking about this lady.
Mwende Mwinzi.
Yes.
In terms of the members of parliament, there's no debate. There is no debate. It's clear to
They're state
It's clear
officers.
even to them that they are state officers, right? So this is
So what they're actually doing is they are going against the constitution.
so it goes
Yes, they
basically
are.
beyond this. It goes into unconstitutional.
Apart from if you can't even say that, apart from it being unconstitutional, it just seems it appears that there is a club of support that you have by virtue of the fact that you are a state official, a public
But
official, in
remember
that, so
that
that regardless of what it is that they have accused you of doing or that which you are alleged to have done, that we're going to support you by virtue of the fact that we operate within the same club, you see? And I think that's where a lot of the protests came yesterday as well.
But do remember, the governor of Nairobi was also senator,
Yes.
and 5 years senator. So these are people
So
who
they're
know him
friends.
well.
This
But
is what I'm saying. They're part of a
but-
club that you would get support by
but-
virtue of the fact that you are one
Let's
of them.
expand on
That's
this
what
word.
I'm saying.
Let's expand on this word club. All right. How many of our governors or how many of our state officials would you say are squeaky clean and do not, and whose lives can actually stand close scrutiny with a full glare of, say, a very bright light? Okay, the silence. I think you've responded adequately.
So
Next
in the
point.
future, because
Your
My point is this. I get the feeling that there's this, it could happen to me and I will need support.
This is what I'm saying. It's
So you're-
like an
you're-
unspoken
you're
convention.
treading
Like,
carefully here.
yeah, it's like an unspoken convention. I'm going to support you because at some point in the future, I might need to call upon that very same support without us realizing that these are serious issues that we're dealing with. And, when it comes to allegations of corruption, crime, the charges that we saw yesterday, it's not chicken feed, folks. I mean, we're looking at some serious stuff. But to say that, look, I'm giving my support. This is something that I seek for you to remember.
I stand by you.
And you know what? Interestingly enough, it's not actually seeking support from the accused, but it's also a picture that you're painting for those out there that look at the kind of support that I am granting our fellow club member, as it were. So you must also realize that I am someone of repute when it comes to the support that I could give you or that which I could actually receive in the future. So it's actually a message that I think is actually being put across.
Let me ask
but
the
it shouldn't
question.
be allowed.
Do you actually think that when these high-ranking government officials like governors are brought to court and accused, or when they are questioned by the Auditor General, do you actually think or believe that they actually see any wrong in what they do?
Oh no, they don't. And honestly, I think even the support that we're looking at now, it's not for lack of other things to do. It was Monday morning. There's a lot of work that other people could have been doing, but that was a big move in terms of perception that they put out there yesterday.
It's wrong from very many angles that you look at it. Of course, there are those who will argue that there's nothing wrong. You cannot bar somebody who, just because you've elected them, you cannot bar them from practicing.
Well, the Constitution bars them, so you can.
There you go.
So you can. And they knew full well when they were actually going into this election that this would be the case. So it's something they've opted in for. I think the argument, if you were to really split hairs and try and find the flip side of the coin, would be that this isn't interfering with their oversight role because it's to do with the judiciary. It's a completely different process. And he's not being subjected to their oversight at the moment. This is a court case. It is something in complete isolation of their oversight role. But of course, it would introduce other concepts such as, their bias and then interests thereafter. But if you were to have somebody argue their side, that would be the strongest argument, that this is an independent process of their oversight role. So there's no conflict per se.
We're discussing the appearance yesterday in court of Senators Kipchumba Murkomen, Mutula Kilonzo Jr. and MP Makueni, MP Dan Manzo in the defense team for Nairobi Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko over corruption charges. And we're asking ourselves, and actually I'm stating that they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't even be taking a brief from any accused governor, especially because they are supposed to be oversighting governors and what they're doing in office. It's wrong. They should be censured in Parliament. 28 minutes to 8 o'clock.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Traffic. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice
FM. So please take it easy, folks, and use your lights as much as you can. And it's going to affect traffic getting into the city, but that's heavy rain there. We've got some showers on Mombasa Road as well, and we have traffic all the way from Syokimau at this point to the JKIA turnoff, and of course trying to get to the bypass and to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. All right, looking at Thika Road, you're being asked to use the service lane from Githurai all the way to Kasarani, and there's an option for you coming off of Thika Road. Coming off Jogo Road, also not so bad as you approach the City Stadium roundabout, and also traffic coming from industrial area will not affect you so much, but it is raining as you get into the city as well. So really now we have the morning traffic that is being compounded by the rain of which the heavens have opened up, so please do be careful. In certain parts, especially around the Mwiki Kasarani area and getting then to Outer Ring, it has packed up to gridlock status. Let's see what it looks like in a short while, but for now, if you're going into those areas, that's what you have served up for you. We'll let you know of more, and we'll see what's happening on Langata Road in a short while. Keep it here and send us any information that we need to know so we can keep folks moving this morning. 0719-012-600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Sunright 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
One of the colleagues of Senator Mutula Kilonzo and Kipchumba Murkomen is Senator Ledamo Olekina of Narok. He tweeted yesterday, immediately he saw this. I'm seeing my two colleagues appearing for Mike Sonko, and I'm trying to figure this out. Is there a thin line between lawmakers and corruption allegations? What's your opinion on lawyers generally, and especially in such circumstances? Lawyers as legislators, and he now calls in this morning. Good morning, Senator Ledamo Olekina. How are you?
Good morning, Eric. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Now, of course, we saw your tweet yesterday, and this morning we are discussing the issue of seeing legislators appearing and taking brief for people who've been accused of corruption. What's your view on this?
Well, I just think it is wrong, absolutely wrong, because in the Senate, we are tasked with the role of defending counties and their governments. But when it comes to the issue of corruption, remember, under Article 192, if a matter has been investigated fully and the president decides to suspend a county government, we are the same people who are going to be forced to sit down and approve that suspension of the county government by the president. So if you have the majority leader and the whip of the party, and the whip of the party is always supposed to whip everyone, or call everybody, and tell them, guys, we have a division. If they themselves are complicit in a way, and they're defending the accused person, it puts us in a very awkward situation. And I'm not saying that we are at that level, but hypothetically, if we were to, because I saw the headlines in the Nation, and I think they're completely wrong, but if we were to go to that extent, then it will complicate matters. The other thing is that these two individuals are the same ones who we've been together talking about the issue of corruption. I remember there was a time when Senator Sakaja brought in a statement regarding the situation in Nairobi. And my same two colleagues. You know, the problem with the internet is that it never forgets. If you go to YouTube, you will find their sentiments. Then what changed? I'm beginning to think that maybe, just a maybe, because I have a lot of respect for my colleague Mutula Kilonzo. I respect him very, very much. So I'm just thinking maybe what he's trying to achieve by defending Sonko is to try to maintain the dignity of leaders. If you're an accused person, you should not be treated the way Sonko was treated. That's the only consolation that I have. I'm thinking.
If that was the case, maybe he would have then spoken up in a different forum as opposed to showing up in court. Because you know what that does, Senator, is that you're basically saying that I am defending the allegations that have been brought against him. If that was the case, such sentiment could have been brought up outside of the court. Do you see? I can understand where you're coming from, but such a sentiment should have been expressed somewhere else. The minute it's brought into court, you've told everybody that, because that's what a lawyer does, regardless of whatever it is being brought against the defendant. I'm supporting them, or I am defending them.
Defending them.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
There's also
although there is also that. Eric, proceed.
I wanted to tell you. I wanted to actually raise the issue of, so if the senator maybe is feeling that the governor was mistreated during the arrest process, there's a pending court case. Well, there's they've promised to, the police have promised to take him to court over mishandling police officers. Maybe that's where the senator could have gone and defended him on this particular case, not on the case of corruption, but on the case of obstructing justice.
Well, I think in that way, I think the press was reporting that the police were going to introduce new charges.
Yep.
So I don't think that would be a very good line of argument, because then the senator would argue that he thought that this was not going to be a pending case. It was going to be an amended charge sheet. So he wanted to. I'm still waiting. I'm still trying to be very hopeful on this matter.
Yeah.
But I think even the way these things are coming out, if you go back, you will find that I sit in the Public Accounts and Investment Committee, and we questioned this. We raised serious concern. I remember even going to one of the television stations and saying about 99% of all the governors will end up in jail. But we've got to separate the facts in terms of what transpired the other day versus what the ethics and anti-corruption, the DPP should be doing.
Yep.
Because I don't agree with the style. The modus of operations is not that hygiene in terms of how you treat an accused person. He's still presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Are there avenues that you could raise this concern that you're actually raising this morning? Are there avenues that you could raise this within Parliament?
Absolutely. No, because there are two things. You see, Parliament is supposed to check. The reason why we have these three arms of government is so that we have a clear check and balance system. I want to take you back to the lamentation by the current Chief Justice. He said, you guys don't put a lot of pressure on us. This issue where you arrest an individual on Friday, you build so much expectations. Corruption cases are not going to be won by arrest on Fridays. I mean, and you know what? I read somewhere, I think yesterday, and someone was arguing saying, really, was that necessary to
arrest him on Friday?
Not even to arrest him on Friday.
Deploy the resources that are deployed.
Deploy all the resources that are deployed. Make a big hula baloo over nothing. If this guy, and I think even Sonko raised that issue, and there, I agreed with him that this guy has been called severally to appear before the ESCC. Why didn't ESCC call him and then tell him come, and then when he's there, the DPP issues his press statement and said, I have authorized the
arrest of the governor.
Of the governor. Really, I mean, we've got a better way of doing this thing, and we have to respect leaders because they are elected by the people.
Senator, there's also the issue of the Constitution. Article 77 talks about state officers not being in other gainful employment as well.
Yes.
Why? Do you see this as one of those where you're contravening the Constitution?
There are two things that happens in terms of Kenya. I can tell you this. There are certain pieces of legislation that have got to be enacted so that can become effective. You know, when you look at this all hula baloo on BPI, in my argument, is that we don't really need BPI. I think we just need to go back and ask ourselves, Chapter 6 or Article 77 or various other articles in the Constitution, you know, have we implemented them? You know? So I think the issue is this. We have got to find a way in terms of ensuring, you know, a fiduciary responsibility. We have to ensure that, you know, state officers, you know, sort of like the person who goes in for an elective position is not doing so because they have money and they want to sanitize their money, but it's a person who believes that he has been created by God to serve the people. So that's my biggest problem there.
Asante sana, Senator, for joining us this morning. Thank you for your insights and your views as well.
Asante sana.
Thank you very
when
much.
you hear from the two senators on their reasons, please share with us those reasons as well. The public would like to know.
All right, I will.
Have a good day.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, it's Kenya's biggest conversation, the situation room at 17 minutes to 8 o'clock. We're discussing the appearance in court of two senators and an MP, and this is not just the first case. We have also seen senators appearing and MPs also appearing before in cases that have where public officers have been taken to court, or even state officers have been taken to court on issues of abuse of office or issues of corruption, issues of criminal in nature. What is the status of that? I am saying it is ethically wrong for a senator, an elected leader, to take such a stance, and the action should be taken on them by Parliament, where they should be told, don't do this again. Save for everything else that you cannot do. 0719 012 600. What are your views on this? Please join in.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So interesting. Excuse me. The senator there was. We were talking about the Constitution and whether this is indeed a breach or a violation of provisions in the Constitution, that being Article 77. And we talked about, or he mentioned, that perhaps we haven't instituted the legal instruments necessary, although it is already there. There's a provision, or rather this provision in the Constitution. It's amplified by Section 26 of the Leadership and Integrity Act 2012, which states, subject to subsection 2, a state officer who is serving on a full-time basis shall not participate in any other gainful employment. And then it goes on to define what gainful employment is. It says in this section, gainful employment means work that a person can pursue and perform for money or other form of compensation, remuneration, which is inherently incompatible with the responsibilities of the state office, or which results in the impairment of the judgment of the state office, or results in a conflict of interest in terms of Section 16. I won't go into Section 16, but there's certain words that jump out at me, of course. Here you've talked, they say conflict of interest, impairment of judgment, incompatible with the responsibilities. If this was to be interpreted, you can see the intentions of the drafters immediately. They didn't want a situation like this to arise, whereby there's a conflict of interest or incompatible with responsibilities, impairment of judgment. Although it could be argued, and this is cutting it really fine, and it's probably for argument's sake more than anything, it could be argued that because these two processes aren't happening concurrently, they are completely different incidents. They're not intertwined, and they don't affect the other, because they could argue that they have no bias after the case. So it could be argued that it does not impair their judgment in any way. It is not a conflict of interest, because the two activities, i.e. the court case and the process in court, the trial, etc., that they're acting in their capacity as advocates or lawyers, lawyers, it's a completely different event from their oversight activity, which will come after, once the president has given maybe direction, and then they have to come in and and decide. So it could be argued that they're acting in different capacities, and because it's not concurrent, there is no conflict of interest. But because we understand human nature, we do know that biases form, and if you're defending somebody in court, it will be very difficult to then be serious about interrogating him thereafter.
If something is in our constitution, must there be a law enacted for it to be operationalized?
Usually as an instrument, so it's to help bring that provision to effect. But no, it doesn't have to, in that you can rely on it as a defense.
So
when it
if
comes to
someone goes
constitution,
against the constitution, essentially they're breaking the law.
absolutely. The constitution is the be-all and end-all of the law.
It's the big one.
It's
It
From
is
one
the
plus
big
one
one,
in this
but
case is two.
It is the big one,
Yes.
but people seem to...
Say the big one
the
without a smaller
statutes-
one.
People
The-
don't
the
want to call it as it
statutes-
is.
What it is,
I
the
think.
statutes are instruments
pick
to
this other
enable
call.
to give effect.
We have
CT is making it very simple, and I think that is
somebody
it.
else on the
yeah.
line. This is the Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja. Good morning, Senator.
Morning, Eric. How are you?
Salama kabisa. Welcome to the Situation
Morning.
Room.
Morning.
Asante. Njeri, how are you? Everyone?
I'm
You?
good.
Good morning.
Now, we're discussing, of course, the issue that we saw yesterday, the two senators and MP, and looking at that from an ethical point of view and also from a constitutional point of view, Article 77.
Yes, it was really interesting. And it's not the first time. I've listened to you guys debating it just for a few minutes. And if you get caught up on the law, you'll get it wrong. Because when you say no state officer should be in any other form of gainful employment, and we get too legalistic about it, then they'll say, oh, I'm doing it pro bono, or I'm not gaining from it, or what is the definition of employment? You know.
Yep.
So no need to get into that. I think ethically and morally, it is completely wrong. It is a complete conflict of interest. Even before you go to Manzo, senators, my colleagues, the leader of majority and the minority whip,
Yep.
who represent the House. Then, in fact, they're not ordinary senators. They're the leadership.
Yep.
Right.
They represent the House, whose mandate in Article 96 is to protect the interests of counties, to make sure that money is spent properly. Going to defend a governor who is there being charged with corruption on a matter that will definitely come back to the Senate. It is like a court of appeal judge being a lawyer in the High Court.
Knowing full well that it will end up on his desk.
The case will come back there. So I said, and yesterday I spoke about it. I think it demeans the role of the Senate.
Yep.
It is a complete conflict of interest. Because tomorrow, if the governor of Nairobi is summoned to the Senate, to the Public Accounts Committee, will you come with his lawyers?
Right.
The leader of majority and the minority whip.
Yep.
In case, and definitely how this matter is going, it will definitely come to the Senate. If, for instance, there's an impeachment or there's any other procedure, haven't the leadership been prejudicial? Even if they say that they were acting in their personal capacities, they're leaders. The influence are the senators.
Yes.
So definitely, I think that was it's completely off. I said it when Orengo was representing Ojamong. I said it on the floor of the House.
Yep.
I said it when another battery of lawyers again were going to represent Justice Mwilu.
Yep.
Look, every Kenyan has a right to fair representation of their choice. That is true. They have a right to be represented well. But not all lawyers are in parliament, surely.
Indeed.
I mean, not all lawyers are in the Senate. Or is it that if do people think that if your lawyers are politicians, that the judges will be intimidated?
Sakaja,
I think
Honorable
it's
Sakaja,
completely wrong.
while we have you on the phone, what do you think is the interest from the senators' point of view, the two senators that are looking to represent Sonko? What do you think their interest is? It can't be purely monetary. What is the political angle here?
I don't know. And I wouldn't want to impute any improper motive, but the first thing I'd say, it is political. Yeah, it is political. Either it is community, or somebody wants to be recruited into one camp. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whichever way you look at it,
It's a political message.
it's a political message being sent. I mean, out of the three, two of them are from the same community.
Yep.
I don't know if it's a coincidence, and it's really
From the same county.
From the same county.
Yeah.
And the same community as the governor.
Yep.
Mheshimiwa, I'd just like to ask.
We saw Kipchumba Murkomen and we saw the deputy president's aide, Faruk Kibet.
Yep.
That tells you Tanga is involved. I mean, it's just messy.
It is quite messy.
Mheshimiwa, if I could ask, if these honorable members like yourself seem to be in contravention of our constitution, what actions can be taken against them?
Well, anyone who's in contravention of the constitution faces court. So a public interest litigation can be done. Ideally, if you contravene the constitution, you should be charged by, the Republic through the Office of the Public Prosecutor, DPP.
Yep.
But clearly, since he won't do that because he's in court with you and he has not raised objection with you representing them, I think we need more public interest law. I wish I was one, man, because it's wrong. It's wrong. It goes against separation of powers. It goes against ethics. Yes, I mean, someone might argue we need enabling laws to really define. But the more laws you need, the more corrupt it shows you are.
Yeah, the more complicated it gets.
It's wrong, and you're just using an excuse.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's time we spoke about it. I wish Parliament was not in recess, because this is a matter I've raised with many other senators, and we were going to bring it to the House. And my issue, by the way, is not because it is Governor Sonko. In fact, I'm waiting for that case to be over, because I've also taken him to court.
Right.
For defamation. He put on Facebook that I did a press conference because I received money. I've also taken him to court.
Right.
So for me, it's not about that it is him, but the house that I represent. Today, in fact, yesterday I saw it in our subgroup. Some of the supporters saying that you guys keep saying that Sakaja has raised these things on the floor of the house, yet his own leader in Jubilee is representing the governor on the same issues.
Yeah.
That means Sakaja has been going against party position. So how do I even defend myself?
You can't. You're caught up in that.
It's a conflict of interest.
Sakaja, now that we still have you, before we let you go, let's talk about the possible scenarios that are likely to play out. Once, if after tomorrow's, of course, ruling on bail. If the governor is barred from accessing office, now looking at what your deputy speaker said last week and looking at the Justice Mombingogi ruling, what's the likely scenario here?
First of all, it doesn't depend on tomorrow, whether he gets bail or not, because Justice Mumbi's ruling talks about anybody who's charged.
And
he's already been charged.
Right.
I did not agree with her ruling. And it's interesting. I deferred with Senator Mutula on that. He said that if you're charged, step aside, but today he's representing someone and saying the opposite thing.
Right.
Because I think if you're a public officer, a state officer elected, the Constitution only envisages a certain number of ways for you to vacate office. So legally, Waititu is still the governor.
Yes.
Legally. But morally, he should, step aside.
He should step aside. But it should be his own volition.
Yeah. But in terms of the legal position, the Constitution, which is our supreme law, is clear on how anybody ascends to the office of governor or how anybody descends from the office of governor.
Yep.
Now, given that her ruling has not been challenged, it is the prevailing legal situation. Until it is challenged. So in as much as I don't like it, I have to accept it.
At some point you did say, Senator, that public officials should step aside in cases like this. What was the acceptance of this? I mean, just from the floor, because you did bring this up at some point and were quite vehement in this.
I brought up with respect to public officers,
right,
who are in the office by dint of appointment. There's a difference between a public officer who's been appointed
and a state officer,
and a public officer who is elected.
Yes.
Because, for instance, if we say governor should step aside and a deputy takes over, when an MP is charged, who steps aside and who takes over?
Right.
So unless the court, and the court can actually go further and say, in its verdict, that they have found you unfit to hold public office. So in Nairobi, this is what is going to happen. We'll have to go back to Justice Mombingogi and tell her, now you told us that a deputy takes over. In this case,
there's none.
that there's no deputy, you cannot create a roadblock and not give us a way out.
Yeah.
Or number two, because the constitution envisages a county executive and a county assembly, the county executive is not the person of the governor. The governor is a member of the county executive.
Yep.
And the county executive has a governor, a deputy,
And 10
he
others.
is. So a declaration can be made that one of the others, they must choose amongst themselves somebody to act as deputy governor. Then that will save us a lot of money. We don't have to go to an election, etc.
Yeah.
Because Nairobi must run. We can't afford 2 weeks. We can't afford a week without somebody with executive authority.
I was arguing yesterday,
Right.
Senator, that we should just dissolve the entire government and let the people of Nairobi have a second chance at electing leaders. Looking at how the county assembly has been, of course, also behaving in terms of kicking out their speaker and back.
Yeah, I mean, that's a feeling I've had for many people. It doesn't take much. 10% of the voters, Nairobi has 2.3 million voters. 10% of them, just 230,000, right? Sign a petition.
Yep.
Given the prevailing mood, there'll be an election. But the problem is, the cost of doing that. The political temperatures in Nairobi at this time, when the economy already is terrible, might not be,
conducive.
the best thing.
The cost of not doing that as well, Senator.
The cost of not doing that, I mean, the approvals for construction that have stayed for more than 7 months.
Yep.
Because somebody suspended the entire planning department.
Yes.
Throwing his toys in the corner because it's been charged. So both situations are untenable. The Council of Governors has called for a meeting of the summit. The summit can also initiate that process.
Yeah.
So let us hear what comes out of the summit. If not, I personally, as Senator, I'm going to go back to Nairobi and to the Constitutional Court to ask them for a way out.
Right.
All right. Asante sana for your call this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes. Schools are closing tomorrow.
Good. So you're available.
You must come.
You must come.
Asante.
Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
God bless you all.
God bless.
You too.
It's a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We've been having Senator Johnson Sakaja, the Senator of Nairobi. Of course, he's spoken out against the sight of the two senators representing Gideon Mbuvi Sonko, the Governor of Nairobi. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
All right, coming to the time where it's traffic all over. Taking a look now, traffic is stretching all the way to, it's known as Kona. It's quite something on Dagoretti Corner, coming off on Ngong Road, and now stepping out of the city, now looking at Mombasa. You got another corner here, Polisi at the Likoni side, courtesy of the Kenya Ferry Service. So there's traffic in Mombasa as well, so all over the city there. Now jumping back into Nairobi, looking at Mombasa Road now, getting to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout is not going to be easy. Chaos, cows and potholes is what you'll find at rush hour in Embakasi. And so coming off of North Airport Road and trying to get round the roundabout and join the General Motors side of things is not a pretty sight whatsoever. Coming off of Ngong Road was giving us some problems earlier on. Limuru Road is jam all the way from Ruaka to Village Market. Udhiru, it's raining and trying to join Wayaki Way. There's a heavy downpour in Nairobi, so please take caution all around the city. This is what you're going to see. It's affecting traffic. Please be careful and drive as slowly as you can. You'd rather arrive alive. 0719-012-600 is the number to call should you see anything that we should know about. Let us know.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It's 2 minutes after 8 o'clock. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining Kenya's biggest conversation. Of course, we are live streaming the show on Facebook, Spice FM KE. Join the conversation on Twitter at Spice FM KE, and you can now call in 0719 012 600. What are your views on this? On senators appearing to defend a governor who's been taken to court on charges of corruption.
Interesting one. Of course, as Sakaja says, the law is quite broad and susceptible to mischievous interpretation in order for them to achieve their end, i.e. allow themselves to be representing Sonko. So, for instance, when we talk about gainful employment, they could say, well, it's done pro bono and so forth. From a moral perspective, I think our moral compass is facing south. It's very difficult for somebody to stand down or to do the right thing here. And that's why we try and actually legislate for morality and
as
push
much
for
as
it.
possible.
Yes, too many laws that are not adhered to and so forth.
Have we ever had a case where somebody has stepped down voluntarily?
No.
Or they just decided, let me just step down.
There's an issue, and they themselves declare and say, I will step down.
No, they fought it to the
thing
bitter
about
end,
that as
unfortunately.
well, the thing about that, if we were to normalize it and make it culture and almost sort of the done thing, we could easily weaponize that. So bring charges about anything, about anybody, if it's a witch hunt. So we've got to be careful with it as well, because this is an elected leader. He is representative of Nairobi folk. So you can imagine if, on any charge you step down, and we know the corrupt nature of our courts and so forth, or our different institutions. If we want to get somebody out of office, we would simply charge them with very minor charges, so long as there's a charge. And it's very easy. We've all had a traffic offense here and there. It's very easy to find something to charge somebody on. So it could create an opportunity to weaponize that system. So we have to be careful.
Look, if somebody has done something, let them step aside.
Also, right to a fair trial, which is an inalienable right. This right to a fair trial.
They will still go through the fair trial.
You're innocent until proven guilty. Now, is it fair that you have to change? And we're talking theoretically now, because it's important that we do go further into these issues when we have opportunities such as this, so that the discourse can actually inform some of the decisions that are made, whether it's by the judges, because of public pressure and so forth. So it's a good opportunity to interrogate this and to furnish it with as much info, opinion, knowledge as we can. So if you're having to step aside from your office, those are repercussions before you've been proven guilty. Now, the only time that you sort of have to live with repercussions of being guilty without having been guilty is, for instance, when you're denied bail because maybe the judge or the jury, whoever it is, deems you a danger to society. So there's a higher principle there. There's a public interest principle. So maybe a serial killer
I can give you
might
a more
not
direct
be
principle. In Kenya, for instance, there's the MD of Kenya Ferry Services. Under your watch, how many people have died in that crossing? Just say, look, if, for instance, somebody drove into the ocean, what is it that we could have ensured to have done to avoid such cases? Step aside and say, this has happened under my watch. I'm sorry. I'm taking responsibility. When you see this happening in other parts of the world, it's because of such issues.
And
Issues
even
of
when
life
an
and
inkling,
death.
and the interesting thing is for a lot of these folks, just as you give an example around the world, is that when there's an inkling, a whiff that something may have gone wrong, they say, you know what? At this point, even if it is going into investigation, let my name then not be associated with this kind of thing. So let me step aside as you do what is required for you to do. Should it come out that truly I had nothing to do with this and my name is clean, then by all means resume office.
Consider me.
But then you go into the situation whereby now the case is carried out and then convictions are done, then yes, your job is finished. But you find that a lot of cases, people will say, you know what? No. It's tainting my image, and it's also tainting the name of this good office, as it were. Let me step aside. And you've had many cases of that.
We do, but the underlying issue here is impunity.
Yes.
You've been accused, and
you
then
still sit
some,
down there, hold on with dear
and
life.
you have no intention whatsoever, even budging an inch.
You
Yes.
actually go out and say,
People
I
have
would
said
rather
it.
Yes,
die
people have said it.
than
But
step
remember,
aside.
what if he is, and I'm not saying he is, and my personal opinion is immaterial here. If he is guilty,
Innocent.
Here we go.
Freudian slip there.
Showing.
Yes.
If he
Your
is-
mind is speaking.
If he is innocent, then why should he have to have had stepped aside? And this is the debate there when it comes to sort of the moral position or whether the law has been immoral or
Can
just.
I ask the question?
The just.
In the West, is it just a culture that they have developed? That when there's an issue that is raised against, not you, the office,
The
you step
office.
aside. Is it culture? Is it a high sense of morality? What
Yes,
is it?
it's that.
It's the moral compass
It's the high sense of
facing
morality.
the true north. In South Korea, the president stepped aside. There were various serious allegations that were raised. Of course, she was found culpable and she was jailed. But before that, step aside.
Those fellows
In
jail
Japan-
their presidents.
We have
don't
to
they?
Yes,
remember
they
with
do.
somebody
Absolutely,
like
without
Sonko,
a joke. You even have some countries where they will whip you literally. Get in line. You know, that kind of thing. You cannot play with public office. You
Yeah.
cannot play with state
But with
office.
somebody like Sonko, he's actually been celebrated for some of his
Antiques.
achievements in jail, and he's been open about it. I think he was quoted on Jeff Koinange as saying, "Yes, I've been to jail, I've stolen money, but I'm reformed now." And there's a celebration. He's got a Robin Hood kind of feel to them, as if he's stolen from the rich, given to the poor, that sort of thing. Of course, he's a populist, so he does juxtapose the poor against the political elite and the rich, and that gives him a lot of mileage. But of course, with populism, it's not an ideology per se, so it's not something that can be sustained. It's a short-term fix, so he can be popular as well. But you see, he has.
Nyeri populism is actually an ideology.
Populism is not an ideology. It doesn't fix anything. No. We can have that debate. That's more theoretical. We can have that debate. Populism is not an ideology.
What is it then?
That whole, avoid it.
That debate.
Jerry can take on.
Avoid
Carry on, Jerry.
In fact, let's talk about populism tomorrow.
tomorrow, okay.
That's a good one, because a lot of people seem to be turning to populism globally. Things like people like Trump, simply because they're tired of the system. And it could be argued that was the case in Nairobi. Here we put a former CEO of a senior company. I'm talking about Kidero. This is white collar, all the credentials, accolades, previous experience, and so on. Yet he still stole, or at least has been accused of stealing, and didn't run Nairobi. Why did you laugh, CT?
Accused of stealing. Let's underline that word.
This is the quote of the constitution of the situation room.
Yes, your mind is showing.
Let's carry on. He stole.
Careful.
Okay?
No, we don't carry on.
Objection.
We basically say accused of stealing.
Okay, he's still accused of stealing, and people still felt that Nairobi wasn't run the way it should be. So I think people thought to themselves, well, if the so-called elite corporate leadership didn't serve us well, why not try this sort of,
Somebody else
I don't know
who
what else to call it, but gangster approach.
Connects with the people is a better word to use.
I think in this case, when you talk about the moral compass, the needle, in this case, there is no needle. I mean,
There's no compass to start
there's no
with.
compass.
With who? With
for us to
Sonko?
be, for us to be
in
able
Kenya.
to.
We're judging him a bit harshly because
we
we
just
don't know
talked
what
about
his
the
value
fact that
system
people.
is. Which brings
We
us
just
back
talked
to what
about
you
the
were
fact
saying.
that you want to
What if the
celebrate.
person is
You're celebrating
innocent?
somebody who you're celebrating someone who said, "This is what I've done," kind of like a thug life in government. This is what I've done, and we celebrate. It's a fantastic thing. So when you talk about the compass, which way is it? Which way is the needle facing? Really,
It's
where are we?
the idea that he's reformed, I think, that we're
Is
excited
it?
about.
Reformed.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's
Yeah.
what he was selling.
what
That
he's
was his
saying.
political
That's what
messaging
he's
on
saying.
that
I've
show.
been there, but
Look,
I've
If we take this
Saul
debate-
became Paul.
All right. Well, since we are discussing it, the unspoken discussion here has always been about what is it that Sonko is doing that other governors or people in leadership are not doing.
Or that they frown upon.
It's the same argument you'd use when people talk about the deputy president. You'd ask, okay, what is this thing that this person is doing that others before him have not done and are still doing?
So ideologies tomorrow. Jerry,
Well, no.
you were saying what if the person is innocent? Should they step aside?
This is the question. And
Yes,
this is
they
why,
should.
No,
Yes.
the maxim in law actually is, first of all, there's the major
who law?
maxim. the sort of underlying doctrine, generally speaking. Of course, you're innocent until proven guilty. And so you shouldn't suffer any repercussions. And stepping aside, I mean, if you think of the dignity factor, popularity factor, in terms of the political considerations, he might lose a hell of a lot. So he might not have lost his freedom in that, you're still outside, there's no custodial sentence. But he stands to lose quite a bit in stepping aside. Even the macho leadership
On the other
sentiments.
hand, he may stand to gain.
And-
This person
and
could
hold
actually
on,
show
it could
that
also suggest that he
considers
feels
his
guilty.
office. He takes seriously the office that you've given him and the
collective
responsibilities that the
psychology,
people have
the
given him.
collective psychology of Kenyans would probably think this guy is guilty. If he has stepped aside, it means he's guilty. So it could
No,
create
on the
biases.
contrary. Actually, I would
could
look at it the other way
create
around. I'd say,
biases.
whoa, this guy believes
That's
in
you
his case
personally.
so
Perhaps
much.
you're a little more discerning
what
than
would you
most.
think?
So then what happens if he is innocent and then the same people who may have deemed
Innocent of what exactly?
of
whatever
whatever
allegation
charges
against him.
have been leveled against him, and
Against
he
the
did
leader.
step aside, and then it came out that he was innocent. Can you imagine the kind of mileage it would give him amongst the
Total.
people? Complete.
Yeah, I
And
believed I
then
was
do
innocent.
come
I
back
told
in
you
and
guys
serve.
I was innocent.
Yeah.
And,
And
here
then
I
I
am.
vacated the office to give them an opportunity to find out all the nitty gritty, because then you're not involved in that process. You remove yourself from the equation and allow them to do the work that they say they would do.
If you follow that argument, then could you then argue that when you incarcerate someone like Sonko, what you're actually doing is making him even more popular?
That's
Of
another
course,
argument.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, of course you could argue that,
That's
yes.
another
Possibility.
argument. But what if he
It
stepped aside?
exists.
Could-
It
is-
exists.
is
What
step-
if he
stepping
did
aside
remove
If
could
he
work
himself?
steps
in his
aside,
favor?
I'm in full agreement with you. He
Yeah.
would introduce a completely new paradigm to the whole
Absolutely.
issue. And he'd be looked at in a completely new light.
New light.
Yes, but then what
If
if,
he did step
but
aside
then
and then
what
was
if
found
he was
innocent?
found guilty?
If he was found
Having
guilty, then
stepped
you say
aside.
yes, he
Yes.
steps
Well,
aside.
life
God.
goes on.
Yeah, we continue.
Life
Thank
goes
God.
on.
Thank heavens that we didn't leave him there to continue.
Actually, no. In Kenya, it wouldn't be. The question would be, who is it who did not like Sonko and who has worked hard to fix him? Remember, we live in a country where even the judicial system and the rulings that they bring into being are questioned. We question everything in this country.
But we need to
And so we
and that's
should.
what we are doing. We need to elevate ourselves to a point where, yes, we are questioning, but at the same time, we are trusting our systems and ensuring that our systems work. One way of ensuring our systems work is that you pile immense pressure on the investigative agencies when you say, you know what, you guys are saying I've done this. I
Do
don't
your
believe
job.
I've done it.
Do your
I'm
job.
actually stepping aside. Do your job. Let's meet in court. This is one clear way of elevating ourselves as a community.
So do you think that should be put into law, that you have to step aside? Because at the moment it's a ruling and it hasn't been challenged. It could be challenged and deemed to be unconstitutional because of being innocent until proven guilty. But do you think it should be legislated for and that should be the law?
It actually is in the law, but then the same way Sakaja was saying, you keep pushing it further. They say you step aside after you've exhausted all avenues of appeal. See?
Where is that in the law? That was in a ruling, was it?
Yes.
That's a ruling. So it's in the law in as far as common law, as in it's set precedent, but we don't actually have it as law in terms of a statute.
In statutes.
Yes. So this is what I'm saying. Should we entrench this into our law and ask
I have
people
a feeling
to step
it's
aside?
actually there in statutes.
Do we have
obviously.
people
not.
who've been asked to step aside and who have then gone back into public office and have succeeded?
And have succeeded
And have
being
succeeded.
the writer.
Yes, have gotten on with their lives. Because there are people who, in
Yes.
this country, people are asked to step aside. Okay? Do we have examples of people who've stepped aside and then gone back to office and continued?
And moved on after the case is cleared? Was Amos Kimunya reappointed?
Who?
Amos Kimunya.
Amos Kimunya. You
Was-
tell us, Eric.
Remember?
Was
I'm
he-
trying to
Minister
remember.
for
I can't-
Agriculture.
I can't remember. He was the
At-
treasury.
He was a treasury.
Yes. He of course was made to step aside through the court process, and then of course the case cleared.
He never came back though into public office. He didn't.
I'm not sure I'd remember that. If somebody would remember that.
Because I was
He
thinking of,
didn't.
of
Yeah.
ministers in that era. There was Murungaru, didn't come back. There was
Daudi Muraria.
yes, and
the PS.
and who was
Magari.
a close associate of
His case,
the president.
his case though had not concluded by the time.
By the time he passed away. Okay?
That kind of thing, though, then makes people believe, or to some degree, that there was some kind of culpability when it came to the charges that were then or the allegations that were then being made. That you don't even make an attempt to come back in, then maybe the allegations that were being made then had some level of truth.
Why are people asked to step aside, by the way?
Because you do a number of things by doing that. You pave way for any kind of investigation to continue, and then you uphold the integrity of the office by not meddling or muddying the waters, as it were, when such an investigation is taking place. So you do two things.
So what you say,
upholding the integrity of the office and giving way for investigations to take place.
Meaning, if you're there, we cannot guarantee integrity.
There you go.
Yes.
But if
we need to respect the office that you hold.
But
so
if
you
you're-
as a person has been accused of something, you step aside, let the office continue to
But
run.
if you're in Kenya and the holder of the office is the office and the holder of integrity is the individual,
then it's moot.
Yes, so
The conversation continues on our social media handles as well. Spice FM KE on Facebook and Twitter at Spice FM KE. And our hashtag is the situation. Our Twitter handles, individuals with Twitter handles. What's yours, Ndu?
Nduoko.
At Nduoko. At Jerry Thorne, or is it Thorne Jerry? At
Jerry
Thorne.
Thorne.
At CT Muga.
With
and
an
as
E.
at Eric Latif.
Yeah, Thorn with an E, of course.
Thorne with an E. 18 minutes past 8 o'clock. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise.
You're listening to Spice FM. 96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
At 19 minutes past 8 o'clock, this is a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Once again, our Twitter handles Nduoko with a H, Jerry Thorne with an E, CT Muga with a H, Eric Latif with a double F.
Good grief.
Spice FM with an M.
H and CT Muga.
Right.
Eric, that's good gymnastics. CT Muga with an H.
Does it have an H or not?
No, it must have an
Oh,
H. But in this particular instance, we'll ask the H to step down.
Step aside.
You know, is it step aside?
The H has stepped aside.
It has stepped aside.
Right.
Yes. For those who doubt it from time to time, let me just reiterate this. Kenya is an independent country. In fact, it's not only independent, it's a sovereign state. And among the things that we do as Kenyans, through our representatives, is we make sure that we have budgets to cater for all the needs that we have. In the previous year, we had a drought, and then there was some famine. And then Kenyans rallied, and Kenyans came to the assistance of their needy countrymen and women. We take it even further. We have departments that we have charged with the sole responsibility of ensuring that whenever some of these unfortunate occurrences appear in our horizon, that they take care of them. Now, this is what a sovereign nation does, or so our politicians would like to tell us. But we then have a situation in Kenya right now when we have more rain than we know even what to do with. People talk about what they ought to do, but there's a question of what they also ought not to do. It doesn't just rain in our houses. Even the Lake Victoria has swelled. You have a situation where houses are being submerged simply because the lake has simply broadened its horizons. But the one thing that we do not have with clarity is how it is we manage the resources we have to mitigate against the situation of this particular catastrophes that we encounter, whether it's famine, in this case, whether it's floods. We don't seem to be clear. I am of the view that it's a situation that requires not just a government effort or individual effort, but a concerted focus on the resources we have that prepare for not just the eventuality, but what we know will happen given the knowledge that we have garnered from what has happened in the past. Kenya must have a disaster management program that actually works.
What would that entail?
What would
make you feel satisfied that what we have works?
Actually, the floods are symptomatic of something catastrophic and something beyond our imagination, that if you look at the history of people who've come to an understanding that something, this actually called, the technical term for it is humanitarian aid, okay? It's something happens and they realize that whatever resources you have, whatever structures you have are insufficient. And in every case that you'd think of, an individual stood out. When people go to school, even in primary school, one of the people that you come across, you have someone called Florence Nightingale. People have heard of Florence Nightingale.
The nurse?
She was a nurse, yes.
Yes, together with 30 other nurses, they went out to volunteer. You've all heard of Mother Teresa, okay? But of interest, these are individuals who've stood out in the selfless giving of themselves and the abilities they have to help other human beings who are in need. Humanitarian aid in the structured form that we have it is taken back to the 19th century. There's a certain Swiss gentleman. The name is written Henry, but Ndu, I'm sure, will tell me.
The H is in this case has stepped aside.
It has
Silent.
stepped aside. Yes, and I'm told, I believe it's called Henri.
Fantastic.
Yes. See how an H and an E become O, I don't know, but there we are, Henri. Dunant. And I'm sure it's also not pronounced Dunant. I'm sure it's Dunon or something of that sort.
It's actually Dunant.
Yes, exactly. So this is how people pronounce their names. All right. Now, this gentleman observed the suffering during a battle, people dying. And he was a businessman, and he decided that with whatever assistance that was already being given in the medical field, he volunteered his resources and himself and his people. Here in Kenya, with every disaster that we have, the government comes in to coordinate the effort, and they ask individuals, they ask organizations, and people do, should we say, give heed to that clarion call. But it isn't structured. The UN has such a body that actually does precisely that. Now, they have something like a budget of something like $130 billion, not shilling, for this. But they've organized it. There are member states. There are around, I think, 30 member states that form this particular organization. Their purpose is to collect for relief purposes. But they are joined with another 70 who they consider non-members. And many of them are simply because they are not developed countries and not from Europe or America, but other countries. Now, if you look at this list of countries who contribute, what they do is they contribute a portion of their gross national income to this. Now, the highest in this particular list is actually Sweden. They contribute 1.4%. And now, interesting, Chile, whom we spoke of, they actually provide 0.01. Qatar, 1.24. No African country on this list.
We don't get money now.
We're the beneficiaries.
Yes.
That's why this is where the money comes.
This is the point. We have our share of disasters, but we don't seem to contribute to this particular kitty, yet we draw from it. Okay?
Eating where we don't plant.
Yes. And yet we have budgets for everything. And yet it is argued that we are prone to disasters. We are prone to these natural calamities, perhaps even more than other places. Disease, when disease are on a rampage, we have Ebola. It's been ongoing for the longest possible time. We have famines, we have drought. Now we have floods. Yet this one thing that we could do as governments, and Kenya as a government, is something we have tried very hard to give lip service to, and we have. It isn't as though you will be able to mitigate completely, but you can reduce the fatalities and you can ensure that people actually get the help that is required. That is possible.
In Kenya, what we have is the NDMU, the National Disaster Management Unit, a multi-agency task force that's put together. It brings in the people from the police service, the military, some people from the military. Of course, you must have people from the national government, that's formerly provincial administration. These are the commissioners, right? So you'll have those people coming together. Like in the case of what we saw in Tasio, when the building collapsed. So those are the ones who are scrambled, araka, and they come in and they, start overseeing the disaster response. In terms of preparedness, it's other agencies that are supposed to be ensuring that there's adequate preparedness. Now, I had raised it a couple of weeks back when I said there's a bill in Parliament to try and convert this NDMU into a proper authority that, has then an office, and then, of course, it's tasked with preparedness and response to disasters. But boils down to where is the money going to come from to run it?
No, there is money. There actually is money. When you budget for things that are important to your people, surely you must budget for disasters.
Is food important?
Yes, it is.
Have we budgeted enough for food?
We say we
Is
have.
health important?
Yes.
Have we budgeted enough?
We say we have.
Yeah. This is the point I was making. Where is the money going to come from? Who's going to have the will to actually ensure that this unit or agency or authority or whatever body
I think
is
that's where you get it, though.
financed?
I don't think it's a matter of if it exists, the money, if it is actually there. It's really then a point of focus and then deciding where each now gets it, how it gets its importance, and then where certain amounts of money will go. Because having planned properly and having gotten things in place, then you realize that a certain amount of money then must be applied to this place. And also, by the time you are coming up with a drought authority, by the time you're coming up with a disaster management authority, that means you're cognizant of the fact that drought will happen,
That there is need for this
disasters will
authority.
happen, and it's not just people sitting in an office twiddling their thumbs 365 days a year. There's actually something that they must do, and then these exercises or these activities require funding. So by the time you've planned and put that in place, you realize that money is needed to actually have them exercise then their mandate. So they know that money is needed, and I dare say that the money is there. In terms then of it being applied, that's a totally different story, because they say, how often it's like, why should I get medical insurance? Because how often am I going to get sick, kind of thing? How often is a drought going to hit us? How often is disaster going to hit us? So maybe this money that we should have applied here, we're going to divert it and use it for another purpose or or for something else, without realizing that you need it. That's why it's an insurance of sort. You need it because you don't know when it will happen.
Actually, it isn't even that. Consider, do the citizenry actually feel? We talk about disaster when it happens. We have this discussion about what ought to be done when it happens, when it's upon us. But do we actually feel this sense of there being a need for us to push for such a thing? Let me explain what I mean. If you look at any traditional setup, our response to disaster management has remained traditional, if you think about it. Meaning, anytime you have a problem, you need to have a caucus of people who can help you. If it isn't your relatives, it's your friends or your neighbors. That seems to be the thinking. And the government seems to think that their role seems to be to set an office, state what it ought to do, job done. And then wait for a disaster.
When a disaster happens,
then scramble and
call friends and relatives.
I like Ndu's analogy of insurance and having insurance. It's a luxury or a privilege to a certain extent. If you're busy sort of looking for food to put on your table and shelter, of course, and a little bit of security on top of that, insurance is the last thing on your mind. You hope for the best. And I think that's the state with a lot of developing economies, whereby, the money is prioritized elsewhere. Natural disasters or what we're experiencing, it's something that doesn't happen too often. So investing a lot of money in a reserve, it doesn't make sense. We have other priorities. We have to educate our people. We have to feed our people. So before we put money aside, these are the activities that we'll fund. And then, of course, when there is a disaster, we're aware that there is humanitarian aid. So that gives us some sort of safety net as well. We know the international community will chip in.
Through.
Absolutely.
But remember, insurance in the traditional sense has also evolved. There's what you call community insurance. Insurance doesn't have to represent this expensive undertaking that people get into. It doesn't. No, there are insurances that are tailor-made specifically for groups of people, and they're not as expensive as people imagine. The best example is the NHIF.
Right.
Yep.
So now, in terms of insuring us against natural disasters,
Our NHIF is that UN body.
Yes.
Contribute to that.
We know that they're
In case of
there.
a disaster,
right?
we draw from
Absolutely,
it.
that's a good one, Eric.
Yeah,
You're
we
right.
know that they're there. That at some point they're going to come through. I mean, look, you're about to be a member of
Our
the
only
Security
problem
Council.
is we don't.
Somebody's going to come through for you at that club level. Don't worry, somebody will sort us out on that level.
By the
It's quite
way, at the
unfortunate.
UN, the office called OCHA, the Office
OCHA,
of
yes.
Coordination. Yes,
Yeah.
they set it up. They understand. Now, one could argue it keeps people employed, but people have to contribute to it. So, Eric, spot on. What if, let's move aside from structured government interventions, right? Let's look at countries where people actually have a lot of money and what they do towards this. People who have money and tons of it in developed countries seem to have this need to form foundations whose sole purpose seems to be to assist the less fortunate.
Yeah, they're philanthropic.
Yeah, some of it goes to developmental aid, some of it goes to social aid, but a lot of it goes to also humanitarian.
Yep.
Think, for instance, the manner in which we tackled our problems, say, with HIV was through PEPFAR. The Presidential Fund for Relief and for HIV and AIDS. It was set up specifically for that. Now, it's humanitarian. Now, we don't have a culture in this country of people believing that they should actually do things on that scale for other people as individuals.
Well, have we reached there?
Yes, we have.
We do. I think with our Harambes and the way we come together, that's been our system. We do have that culture. I think it's doing things for people that you at least know are connected.
No, you didn't hear what I said.
The government.
You didn't hear
Let's
what I
take
said.
a look at the traffic and then we come back and hear what you wanted to say. 27 minutes to 9 o'clock. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise.
You're listening to Spice FM. .1 Spice FM. Kisi. Traffic. 96.1 Spice FM. Kisi.
Things on Juja Road are not looking good at all. Ime Shikana, Kushikana. And unfortunately, the Siokimau train to town has stalled. So we have quite a number of people sitting on the train waiting to try and be transported to the city center. Yes, these things do happen. And it's raining and there's no way for them to get out right now, because where would they be going on the train to nowhere? Okay, so really, the train actually has stalled and they're trying to actually find out how they can get people off of it and get them off where they're going. The southern bypass is not moving in the Utawala area. People are now using the bypasses as a way to get off of the main highway, but unfortunately those then are now compounded with traffic. It's jam plus rain plus stress equals a miracle for disaster, or rather a recipe for disaster. Limuru Road is what you'll see right now, not moving at all. Thika Road has also joined. Langata Road also has joined the foray. Really everywhere you look, because of the fact that it is raining everywhere you look. We also have traffic coming out of Mombasa around the ferry area. It is at a gridlock for some reason. We'll find out the reasons in a short while. 0719012600 in case you find some information we can use. Don't hold back. Let us know so we can spread the word.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
What we call this Kenya's biggest conversation is because of what we discuss. This hour we're discussing humanitarian aid, and City Muga is talking about, our country's preparedness and our country's willingness to also help others.
See, I was talking about individuals. I know the Harambee spirit lives on. In fact, it's actually metamorphosized in some wonderful things that people do within communities. But there are people who distinctly have a lot more money, a lot more money than everybody else. Mm-hmm. But one doesn't see that culture of them setting up anything that is geared towards assisting. Now, when we wanted to repair roads, and we remember the government budgets for these things, remember? Mm-hmm. But what did we do? Fuel levy. Mm. So it meant a certain amount, whether it's a shilling or two, out of everything you pay for fuel goes towards the roads. Mm. Tested, tried, it works. We have disasters. And in this country, like every year it will occur. Mm. So it's not as though it's very difficult, even if you budget for it. Why not say that every time you do this crazy thing of, because a popular sport in the government is to keep increasing fuel prices, even when the price of crude oil is going down in the rest of the world. In this country, with its unique way of doing things, we increase our fuel prices. Why don't you just say that 1 shilling out of every shilling that you're now paying goes towards that kitty for disaster management? So we actually know that disaster management has a kitty, and we even have an amount, and we know. Why not?
Because that 1 shilling needs to go to education. That 1 shilling needs to go to food security.
No.
It needs to go to housing security. Absolutely. There is no that extra 1 shilling to go there.
Are you saying it doesn't need to go to disaster management?
No. It doesn't. Well, it's not a pressing need, not as pressing as food, because otherwise then we'd have a disaster there if there's starvation and would need humanitarian
But
aid.
food isn't grown by the
That's
government.
the paradox of it. No, food security
government
is a
doesn't grow
duty.
food.
It's a duty of the government to ensure food security. Now, what I'm saying is there's more pressing issues or higher priorities.
Like which one?
These disasters are few and far between. Let's be completely honest.
No.
When was the last time we experienced something of this nature,
Starvation.
a natural disaster? Exactly. So
When is the last time we experienced starvation?
things are
This
going,
year.
How many people must die for it to be
this-
serious?
No, starvation.
How many people must be displaced for it to be serious?
What you need to understand is the money that we make as a developing economy, we actually put a lot of it to avert these natural disasters. So things like food security is actually averting starvation, which would be considered a disaster. So we're not going to put money aside in case there's a disaster when we can avert a disaster. And so that's where this 1 shilling is going to ensure that people are fed, for instance, to ensure that there's food security, to ensure that people are going to school.
And why can't you do all that at the same time?
So now
Because
what
we
have,
don't have enough money. This is the thing.
But here we
We're
are.
a developing country.
No,
I don't
what
know
you
what
mean-
informs your expectations, CT.
No,
You're,
but
you're
what-
ingesting
what-
too
no.
much Western media.
No,
We're still
it's
developing.
you who ingests Western
we don't
media.
have the financial muscle that
We
you purport
do.
for us to do all these things. We
We
do
do.
not. We cannot afford it.
We do.
We don't. We don't.
We do.
Because otherwise, we'd be completely developed with
We
free
do.
hospitals. We don't.
We do. We misplace our money.
we misplace our priorities.
Yes.
So our
That's
priority
clear.
should be natural disasters.
No, our priority
Management over
in terms of
prevention.
our priority in terms of planning is totally skewed. And if it had some kind of focus, you would find that even if there was a little bit here and a little bit here, we would be able to do much better overall.
Are you saying
even
the people who do the
place-
budget don't know what they're doing? These are
Actually, yes.
no, that's completely wrong.
Yes.
These are people who are well informed. Of
It
course,
can't
it then
be
goes
right
through
because
Parliament.
you say it is
No,
wrong
no,
or
no,
wrong
no. If
because
they
you
were
say
well
it's wrong.
informed,
then
if they were
goes
well
through
informed, we would
Parliament.
not be seeing what we see.
Which then goes through Parliament. These are members of of Parliament that you've elected. So there's a process of scrutiny here. We're not a banana republic.
We are a banana republic.
At this rate.
Jerry, you gave an analogy, right? And your analogy was actually talking about the individual and the competing needs of an individual. I have to feed myself. I've got to take my
I
children
think
to
that was
school.
you, no?
Right?
No, it was you.
It was you,
me, right? This morning?
All those
Yes.
things.
A few
minutes ago, actually.
2 minutes ago.
And
I
all the
need to have
things-
my coffee.
and all the things that you need to do. But then, and you're saying the issue of insurance doesn't really come up in that hierarchy.
It's
when
not a
people were
priority
shown-
when I don't have food and
But
shelter.
when people were shown what that 500 bob would do for you and your family once you actually set it aside, they started buying into it.
If you have it to
because they
set
can see.
aside, you're not going to go hungry and set that aside and look at it.
Okay, so in that case, why set up? This is the thing. If you did not take that into consideration from the beginning, why set up an office? Why be part of regional bodies? Kenya is part of a regional body that deals with arid issues and challenges. Why set up such offices if you're not going to apply some kind of focus and
Or if you
budget
don't think
towards
it's
it?
important.
Or if you don't think it's important, or if you think that, okay, you know what, with all the, by the time they come knocking on your door and say, hey, you know what, you guys, you actually are part of this area whereby you will be challenged by droughts and in some cases intermittent flooding. You're part of that. So we're forming this regional body so that we can tackle this thing. If it was not a priority for you, that said, you know what, I have other issues that I'm facing right now.
No, you can
in terms
put
of
some
feeding
small money aside. Even
this is what we are
No,
saying.
but on a serious note,
that's what we are
those are
saying.
the efforts we can afford to do things maybe collectively, collaboratively, regionally, or to have a small office. But this is not a priority because, first of all, it is not something that is ongoing.
Okay, look at where we are right now. We've now, I think we're going to cross the 20,000 in terms of individuals now who are affected. 20,000 people. That's what we're about to cross now. let's not even talk about the health disaster that's going to come as a result of this. That is where we are now, because we did not plan in terms of there's nothing we could have done to stop the landslide.
Sure.
There's nothing we could have done to stop the rain. But how about if there was a plan in place that would have then helped to mitigate when it came to all these people who now have been affected as a result of this? Now we're working from the back. We're going to have to deal with health issues. There's not enough food. We're going to have to deal with issues of shelter. We're going to have to deal with issues of
from which
and
we are
there's
drawing.
no money.
We're basically saying that we're now getting money from
we
other
have this culture.
Those
I want
are
to
the
give you
very
an
important
example.
things, and Jerry, you're saying.
Funerals. I want to give you an example. Funerals. Even for rich families, you will find that people will contribute to a fund for the funeral because it shouldn't take away from their daily expenditure, their daily lives, or sort of their setups. Now, this is something similar. Yes, we have put a little bit of money aside. You're saying it's not enough, but this is something that doesn't happen too often, whereas there are things that or activities the government needs to put money into that actually avert these disasters. I've given an example, ensuring food security. That averts starvation. Now, do we take money from that and say, let's put some money aside in case there is starvation, or do we actually use the money to stop it?
But
This is where we are in terms of our financial muscle and our economy.
Look at the trend. And I'll give you an example of somebody who's come from outside. Every year since I have been in Kenya, there has been a drought. Every year. And then there have been calls, okay, we need to move some things around to get some money to the affected areas. Every year, you know that this was happening 5 years ago. It's going to happen for the next 5. In terms of planning for that, how has that been?
So it's a constant.
It's a constant, and you know that it's going to happen. But in terms of planning and then mitigating for that.
No, why not
mitigate
the drought itself?
As you're working towards ensuring
with food security, which is what the government is doing.
At the same time, prepare.
That is what the government has never done.
That's what they've never been
under the
able
Uhuru
to do.
administration. It is doing it. Food security is one of the big 4.
2019 was the worst year.
Food security
as far
in
as
this
food
country under the
security in this country,
Ruto
the worst.
has been at its worst in the history of this country.
2019 being the worst.
They tell us there was maize, food security. We saw the drama, did we not? I did not go into it.
We've had maize scandals even.
Now there's a aflatoxin in that
even when I
maize.
was a child, there was maize scandals.
No, those weren't scandals. Those were just pure scarcity. it was caused by drought.
Which was food.
This one where you are told we have enough reserves. And then we import, and yet we have reserves. And yet at the same time, farmers who have maize have their produce rotting in the field.
And people are dying.
That's food security for you.
And people are
That's
dying
government
because
planning.
they don't have access to food.
This is where now the money is going in terms of averting these natural disasters.
Which money?
The money you purport should be
going to what? To buying maize?
Should be put into
when we have farmers who already have maize that we could buy?
Security strategy. It's one of the big 4. What I'm saying is we have higher priorities. Let's be completely honest with ourselves.
Higher than human lives?
I was giving you the example of a funeral. You get even wealthy families, people contributing to a kitty. So it's not. This is not something that is a constant. I don't believe it is. As a disaster, it's not. We can avert the disaster.
It's been constant for 20 years.
And that is why we're putting money into food security
and
to
what
avert
is
the
more,
disaster.
If you look
what
at
is
natural
disaster?
disasters in this country, they are on the increase, not
on
on the
the
decrease.
increase. And this
And
is
the pattern is clear.
around the world. And this
Yes.
is what we are saying. The indicators are clear. You have set up an agency in this country that is going to tell you this is what you can see. They told us 2 months ago, this is what you can see coming. In terms of preparedness of what is going to happen, they are aware. And so what we are saying, use this knowledge, plan properly in the event that something should happen, because you're the one mandated to do this. In the event that something should happen, these wonderful policy documents that we have in place, enact them.
The National Disaster Drought Management Authority is not an ad hoc committee that comes up. Are we likely to activate NDMA this year? No, it's actually a permanent one. It's drought management. And it's there working throughout the year. And every year they produce a report. No, they don't even do much.
They tell you.
They produce a report and they tell you this is a kind of the severity.
You guys are so skeptical.
This is the severity of the
but
drought.
this is not
That's
even
their
about
job.
any emotion. This is what they
That's
do.
their job.
It isn't
it's a
emotion.
self-loathing.
Please,
Their job is actually
please
to look at
remember, we are at very distinctly different points of view. Nyeri is supporting government efforts which are non-existent, and we are trying to tell her they are
So how do you
non-existent.
think we're surviving? Do you know
By
what?
the grace
of God. Yes.
My dear. That's
Guys,
how it be.
this is a self-loathing perspective.
It
no.
isn't.
No, it's the
No.
Jerry,
You're
why-
assuming
let
this.
me give-
We have had the government spokesman on the phone and tell us exactly what they're doing.
And then the next day, it was reported that actually people are not. It is not contained.
Yes.
It is not.
He told us it
How
was
do you
contained.
Told us
the
it was
rains?
contained.
No, he
but
didn't
He
say
said
the
it has
rains.
stabilized.
Situation.
He said the situation has
Stabilized the
stabilized.
He said the
situation.
No, no.
situation
Has
in terms of
stabilized.
what they were able
Yes.
to provide to people,
And,
not the
and
weather
also
conditions.
Let's understand with humanitarian aid, even as somebody who was involved in finance, if I know that the hearts and minds of people will actually come through, then I can rely on that. That's enough of an insurance to a certain extent. We've seen it world over, whereby other countries do step in when there's a natural disaster. So if I have a limited amount of resources in terms of financially as a country, it's not going to go to that area. I'm not necessarily going to invest too much. I'd rather invest in something like infrastructure development that will give me the ability to never have to need the West. But in the meantime, the West or this humanitarian aid that comes through, why not utilize it? What's the problem?
I think where at fault the government is in terms of creating a mechanism that ensures that we adequately tap into all these humanitarian aid agencies and organizations.
So we're not doing enough to tap into.
Yeah, we are
the
not doing enough to
humanitarian
tap
aid.
into those ones.
Oh, okay.
Where is the money coming in?
I agree with you.
Where is it going? Are we using it enough? Those that we have locally, are we actually, because we should be getting this money also to build our own capacity internally. One of the reasons why we are not doing that is because we don't have a structured way of dealing with this humanitarian aid, international.
And do you have
humanitarian aid
evidence that we don't have a
organizations.
structured way? Because if you're making that accusation,
Wait.
The evidence is a lack thereof of any.
No,
that has been put
No,
in.
Eric,
We
Eric,
know about
no, no.
NDMA. We know about Kenya Red Cross. We know about
you
all
assume
these
we don't
bodies.
work in a structured manner. People are
Where is the
qualified
structure?
for these
Actually,
jobs.
we
You're not
talk in
there
a
on the
structured
ground.
manner.
You don't know the connection.
Structures.
Red
But-
Cross.
but
When
neither
Red Cross
are
speak,
you. You're
when
also
Red Cross
not on the
speak,
ground.
they say alongside the government. Now
Structures,
there is a working
Jerry.
relationship. There must be a framework through
Structures.
which these people operate and navigate their daily duties. It's not something that's done ad hoc. These are the lens you need to take off when
Structures.
you
No, no,
view
no.
Africans. Yes.
Jerry,
Structures
Yes.
are well
You're-
laid out.
No, this is some self-loathing.
You
You're
see, you
assuming.
Africans. You see.
When
It's
we
11
view
minutes
Africans.
to 9. It's 11 minutes to 9. 0719 012
96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Where are the structures?
No. Let's not even go to the structures, Eric. If indeed the government is doing what it's doing, I am certain they would be the first to tell us about it.
Do you know if you're going to throw allegations and say that the government is not doing X, Y,
I
Z, or that
had begun a statement, but carry on. In
No, I was coming back to
in
Eric.
true fashion and tradition, carry on. Yes.
Absolutely. I was coming back to what Eric was saying. Where are the structures? Why don't you actually approach these ministries and say, how do you go about doing X, Y, Z? And until you see what framework they use and then poke holes within it with evidence as to best standard or best practice and so on, you can't just come and say, no, they're not doing things within structure. We don't know how they're doing things. I don't think you have this knowledge. I'm sure if you go to the Ministry of
Let me tell
Devolution...
you the kind of knowledge I have. The knowledge I have is I know that we have an NDMU, right? Disaster Management Unit. I also know we don't have a disaster management policy. It's being worked on. I also know we don't have a National Disaster Management Authority. There's a bill in Parliament. So we don't have a policy on disaster management. We only have a unit that is a multi-stakeholder, multi-agency task force.
It's
If
like
we don't
the-
have a policy...
it's like the Coast Guard.
Yes. There's no structure because there's no policy. Now, when you're talking
when
about...
you say we don't have policy on it, what is your definition of policy? Because it could be a cabinet directive that is considered policy. It could be just a an agenda that is considered policy. What do you want, a policy paper? What do you want in terms of policy?
The government itself has talked about creating a policy. What they mean
So
is what I mean.
further enhancing perhaps what they have.
that
Whatever
gov-
they're doing
How
is
the
policy
proposed
based.
agency
No,
sense
the
is going
policy,
to run.
the policy
If
that
the
the government
government-
has said it does not have is what I'm referring to. Whatever structure, whatever form of
But Eric, pause.
policy it is.
You do know of another policy that they have. Which is it, Nyeri?
No, however they're operating is a policy. Whatever
No,
they're doing
they
at the
don't have
moment
a policy.
is policy.
They created a unit after those
reacting
disasters
to
in
the
Nairobi.
disaster.
After the couple of disasters in Nairobi,
was
buildings
reactive.
collapses. They of course created now this unit, and they said let's have a better way of coordinating this within Nairobi. Create a unit. This unit will operate from this point, and then we shall start working on a policy. The policy not ready,
Okay, so it's something that is growing.
so we don't
and-
have structures
and
yet.
You have,
And that's what I'm saying. I'm faulting the government. It has taken so long. Now, also, we have all this.
is this
we have
the
all
only
this-
avenue through which, so for instance, food aid has been delivered?
We have
a
all
lot of
these
aid has been
humanitarian
delivered
agencies working
to-
in the country, all right? So they come in and they work. Each of them is allowed. So you are a World Health Organization, you are World Food Program, you are Kenya
And they
Red
plug
Cross.
themselves. They plug
Just
themselves
come in
into the
and
relevant
plug yourself
agency.
in.
And
Say
if I
we're
can
going to
give you an
work
example.
on malaria cases in somewhere in Nyanza. And you're told, all right, go and work in malaria in Nyanza.
For example, the United
No.
Nations DRR, which is now the System for Disaster Risk Reduction and the custodian of a certain framework from the United Nations, plugs into the Kenya Met. So they come into the country and they find, okay, this is our mandate internationally, globally. What can we plug into locally? And then they plug in. So they share ideas as per how that can work. So you have agencies that are riding along with some international global or global agencies, and they kind of do that. But in terms of an overall plan, in terms of what would happen, no,
Not there.
doesn't exist.
Okay, first of all, there's multiple institutes or agencies or bodies that they would work with. It's a lot more complex than just saying, okay, we're coming to Kenya. Do you have one body we could work with that could coordinate everything? In terms of vetting them, it's not that people just come into Kenya and work, these NGOs. There's an NGO board that actually monitors their activities because, of course, we're susceptible to external influence with these people coming in, whether political, financial, whatever it is. So there's an NGO board that would scrutinize these people's activities.
There's
But
an NGO
Coordination
coordination board that would scrutinize their activity.
Yes.
The main thing is there's a government agency that does its job there. So let's not
Now, do you see
be
what I was-
flippant.
No,
Let's not be flippant and
no.
say people just
Hold
come
on.
in, do what they want as they want. No, it's a bit more
I don't
coordinated.
think that's what
that you
that's
make
not
out.
what Eric said.
No.
I was talking about a centralized coordination of saying these are our needs in
So
healthcare.
in the event that something would happen, who takes the lead? And I think that
Yes.
has been brought up previously.
Many times.
So a lot of times we've had what has happened with disasters like this. You find that the Red Cross would be at the forefront of all of this, and then they would now make sure that the activities, whether it was provision of basic amenities for people, whether it was rescue, road rescue or air rescue, you find that they would be at the forefront of this and take the lead when that is concerned. I think what you're coming from is saying that in terms of an overall nationally appointed board planning kind of task force or agency, we don't have such a thing
Or a
in place.
clear one.
Look,
Or one that is clear.
If
in
a
terms of
new
what
body,
happened.
if a new body wanted to help us, and this body is from
by the
Thailand.
way, don't come into the country because we have a disaster. Most of them are already here.
They're here. They're mandated
This
to
is
do that.
this is the part they launch from when they provide humanitarian aid to the countries
the region.
around
In the
us.
region, yes.
So it's not as though they're already here. And also, we have regions in this country that seem to perennially have a problem, one or the other. If it isn't drought, it is famine. If it isn't famine, it is flooding. Now, and they are constantly provided. Now, remember, one of the areas that humanitarian aid also works with are refugees. Now, we have refugee camps in this country. So these humanitarian agencies work with refugees. So it's not as though they've gone somewhere else. Now, whenever you have the risk of an epidemic, of some disease that is likely going out of control, it isn't just one body that caters for it, because some of these things involve movement. Now, our neighbors have had unrest. Now, this unrest causes movement. So there will be agencies who deal with this. So, in short, they are already here. So all they're doing is stepping it up. I mentioned yesterday that the UN has contributed 300 million shillings towards the problems that we have. Why? Because they have the resource and they have kept it. People contribute to it. They couldn't give it if they didn't have it. Now, what stops us from doing the same thing?
Pertinent question.
Nothing
What?
stops us from
Precisely.
doing the same thing.
Nothing. Because we say, yes, that it doesn't happen every day, but look at the things we plan for. Every aspect of our lives, apart from waking up, and also it's periodical. Everything we're discussing is symptomatic of human life on a daily basis. Everything we do, from eating, from children going to school, everything. There are times when we don't do it, there are times when we do, and we plan for all these things. Now, these natural occurrences are part of our lives. We can't run away from them. We can't wish them away. And unfortunately, because of whether it's climate change or the greenhouse effect or the moon moving closer to the sun or some other planet, whatever the reasons are, they are on the increase. And they must be planned for.
Yeah,
and they must be prepared for.
There's definitely a reason why
You know,
I said
it's not mentioned, but in 2016, we had similar problems, and then we had drought. Do you know how many people were displaced in this country? Over 100,000. But because it was in the Tana River Delta and other places, one doesn't seem to take notice. But it happened.
It wasn't widespread.
Yes. Now, this one is widespread. It is literally everywhere. It doesn't have to get there. You see, research is supposed to inform policy. And why research is conducted is so that you understand. We don't need research for this one. We can see it.
it's clear. It's
You
clear
can
and it's
clearly
obvious.
understand it. And also, what needs to be done is not something that is rocket science. No. We've had it in smaller measure. We just have it now greater measure. So it's not something we don't absolutely say we don't know. If there was a volcanic eruption, I would say, this is
No,
new.
that one is new. Right.
This is
yeah.
new. But there's nothing happening here which is actually new. And that is not something that someone can then say that they have an excuse for not being prepared for.
Brings me back to that issue. I was saying we should just let Red Cross manage our disasters. Then they'd be able to actually coordinate with the rest of all the other humanitarian agencies that come in and work in the country on how to help us move forward. Because clearly, we have the will, we don't have the wherewithal to actually actualize some of these things. So here we are. We talk about it. We have.
I want to draw an interesting
it's on
parallel.
paper.
Do you remember when the Kenya-Uganda railway was being built? The idea was to start from the coast, get to Uganda. Why? Because the people who were building it intended to use it for transporting whatever it is they wanted to transport. Isn't it? It was a business. How different is the Kenya-Uganda railway from the SGR railway? Now, the Kenya-Ugandan railway was not paid for. Those who built it because that was their investment in ensuring that they are going to get what. Now, the same preparedness. When we were in the process of negotiating for the SGR, there's the benefit that the builders will gain from this. The question is, was this taken into account? And why do we have to pay what we're paying when we know very well that they will benefit from this? Look at what the SGR is now doing in Tanzania. Tanzania have signed an agreement with Burundi and Rwanda. That's how far that particular railway is going to go. By the way, this isn't an idea that has popped into my head. A friend of mine mentioned it to me, so I thought I would share it.
There you go.
There you go. It's coming up to 9 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're talking about humanitarian aid and Kenya's preparedness for that and Kenya's use and tapping into humanitarian aid from international friends as well. Good morning. Let's take a look at the traffic.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice it up.
Spice up your life.
All right, it's clear Mombasa Road. From Mombasa Cement, it's speedy flow inbound. Mlolongo towards the SGR is busy but moving swiftly. In and around Cabanas to General Motors, outbound at St. James is also clear. It's free flowing from Syokimau through Athi River all the way outbound, and traffic is clear. All right, Langata Road inbound traffic is moving well from Bomas, and it clears well through towards Sunshine. It's good flow all the way at the Timor roundabout. Outbound to Nyayo Stadium roundabout is also very clear. Let's take a look at Thika, what's happening there. Muranga Highway heading to Muranga, traffic from Juja is slow but moving in the opposite direction is also quite busy. Coming back into certain parts of the city, it is moving slowly from Donholm, busy from Makadara to the City Stadium. Outbound also have some good flow. Let's see what happens in a short while. But for now, everything seems to be looking better, although the roads are still a bit wet because of the rains.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start
it's
your
Kenya's
day.
biggest conversation wherever you are in traffic. We hope it's flowing. As we continue the conversation on humanitarian aid and humanitarian assistance, some updates on Governor Mike Sonko. You know, he was remanded at the industrial area last evening. Apparently, he fell ill and he's been transferred to the Kenyatta National Hospital to seek treatment.
This is Sonko. Right.
Yeah.
This is the law can be an ass, isn't it?
The magistrate allowed him to seek medical treatment. Somebody's asking, will you all be disclosing your medical ailments before, or shall we wait for you to go to court so we know that you are unwell? Continuing the conversation.
One of the things that people talk about, there's a conventional way of dealing with disasters like, say, famine or drought and flooding. But one of the things that perhaps isn't discussed and yet is practiced is farming in these severe circumstances. It's what you call dryland farming. And it's a practice that is carried out around the world. And then there's flood-based farming, believe it or not. And these are some of the things that one could consider. If we move away from thinking about humanitarian aid, this is, in my opinion, a longer-lasting solution. Because if you understand this, think, for instance, carry the agricultural research organization that does this sort of work, develop seeds for all sorts of climate, all sorts of weather. Now, most people may not even know that this is what they do, but they do. And they test these things, and they work. And that is why you'll find in one place, someone seems to be planting something like maize, and gets a huge yield, and while the other doesn't. And for the simple reason, seed. When you look at ways in which the very dire circumstances you find yourself in can actually be turned around and can be utilized to carry out the same activities you carried, instead of holding on to the mindset of what you call traditional farming, which is rain-based, as opposed to, again, farming which is irrigation-based thinking. These are possibilities, among others, that one can consider.
So we move away from seeking aid. Are you also saying that we move away from also preparing?
When you prepare...
So it sounds like you...
No. When you prepare...
Jerry has convinced you that, let's spend our energy and resources on...
When you prepare, it means you have the means to help people do this sort of farming. Remember, it's new. It isn't as though our people do it. So if you have the money, it can be diverted towards that sort of activity. So that when the dry season does come, you had anticipated it and your life actually continues. When the floods do come, you had anticipated it and you can do something about it instead of just crying that it's raining everywhere and you do not know what to do with yourself.
There's definitely things that can be done, but I don't think the approach has never been, unfortunately, has not been widened to that point. And that's what we have to be thinking. I think, we keep saying that we're making strides in development. Well, this is one of the major things about development when it becomes to be prepared about things that would stagger or that would prevent development in any way. So it's not just about moving forward, but it's also about being prepared for what could come. And then to say that we're moving forward along up the development ladder, there's so many things that need to be taken into consideration. Look, nobody's saying it's easy, but we are saying that it is necessary. And sometimes we're going to have to bite the bullet in terms of being ready for some of these things, and it's an absolute necessity. Because it averts some of the things that we are seeing today, something that people continually cry about in just what we're seeing today. We're probably going to hit 30,000 in terms of those who are affected in a very short while. But saying that to be prepared for that, okay, there's a lot more that we can do. Yeah.
Preparing for a rainy day.
Literally, because I mean, think about it.
Put it
For a
mildly.
rainy day, if you do buy an umbrella, that kind of thinking would say, okay, well, it rained today. Here's the umbrella, toss it out the window, as opposed to keeping it because you realize that it could rain another day.
Still.
A lot of our lives revolve around that. In economics, you call it opportunity cost. You make a decision that is not based on what you may consume now, but something that will help you in the future. And then you give a cost to it. And when you consider, you will realize that it is perhaps better to put that thing aside and wait for that day. It'll cost you less in the long run.
Indeed. It's 7 minutes past 9 o'clock. Good morning. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Remember, we live stream on Facebook, Spice FM KE, www.spicefm.co.ke. We're broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa, 87.9, 102.5 Kisumu, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, and 97.7 in Malindi. Tag us on Twitter at Spice FM KE, our hashtag, The Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
In the Situation Room this and every morning, my name is Eric Latif. We have Siti Muga, Nduoko, and Jerry Thorne.
Back to Sonko, I'm afraid. Of course, this time looking at a conviction, which is what Kenyans are baying for in terms of feeling that the war against corruption is happening. Of course, it's a complex dynamic to fight corruption because it fights back. It's very complicated, and sometimes the government doesn't communicate all its achievements as it should. So when we see drama like this is when we feel the government is working. But there's a lot more that goes on behind closed doors. Of course, there's the prevention of corruption. So there's different systems that have been put into place, not going into detail, but there's the preventative aspect in ensuring that not so much corruption happens. There's the asset recovery aspect, which should be a lot better reported. Occasionally you hear the media say, you know, they recovered 30 billion. From where, from whom, what are they doing with all of this? We see the arrests from time to time. Excuse me, the EACC investigations, a lot of drama around this, and of course this captivates the nation. This probably being the most riveting one. We've had it in the news since Friday. There was a lot of drama about it. So you get the sense that the government is doing something about corruption, but what tends to happen is all these things come to a halt when it comes to the court systems, and of course the media doesn't follow up with some of the reports. People are probably still wondering what's happening to Rotich when they arrested at some point, former Minister of Finance and so forth, Thuge as well. So the media, of course, needs to report, and also the government has a duty to inform people a lot better so that we can understand that they're serious about the war and graft and we can see what they're doing. But for now, I think Kenyans are baying for blood unless they see the conviction of a high-profile politician, CS. They will not believe that the war against corruption in this country by the president is serious. So the jury, or rather the judiciary, is under a lot of pressure.
I wouldn't put it just squarely on the judiciary. I'd say the justice legal system, the system itself, starting from the investigation to the prosecution to than the judiciary. Because there are very many cases where you hear, yes, the investigators say that they have a solid and sound case against somebody, then they go to court and they charge somebody in court, and from that point on, the prosecution itself is the one that is seeking adjournment after adjournment.
I think that I think
cases.
that's the rebuttal from the courts when they've been accused of sort of tampering on this war against corruption by not giving us enough convictions. There is, of course, the onus is on the DPP to secure convictions, and they do come up with evidence. But you'll find the courts have been very clever. I mean, there's some evidence that's not admissible anymore as a result of this right to a fair trial. So it is very difficult to secure convictions because, of course, innocent until proven guilty, the onus is on the DPP, on the prosecution. Having said that, the judiciary itself, interestingly enough, has been accused of being corrupt and being susceptible to bribes. And of course, if somebody's been accused of corruption, they're likely, to extend that corruption into the judiciary to pay for their freedom.
Just on
so
this
you can
case,
see you can see how complex it gets.
And in some
Just on
cases,
this case alone, I mean, the sentiment widespread right now is that, okay, we're going to go through all of this drama that we've been seeing over the last 3 days or so, and in about 2 weeks, it's going to be a forgotten case.
we'll move on to something else.
Unfortunately, it's quite sad that is the common perception, that people actually feel that, yes, this is just another case whereby there is a high-profile individual now who is in the court system, and the allegations that have been brought has been charged in court, but they feel that there is a lack of transparency in the system, and that somebody somewhere will be, as CT likes to call it, seen, and is going to float through, or rather sift through the system, and this gentleman will go scot-free if indeed he is guilty of the allegations that have been, or the charges that have been brought against him. So it's quite unfortunate that you have quite a lot of people feeling that. So I mean, then really, what is the heartbeat in terms of what people feel is the real situation concerning the judiciary that's clearly reverberating through society? People do not feel that it is a just and fair system.
And I think the judiciary, that I keep repeating this, I think the judiciary is unfairly accused in very many of these cases.
There's been pretty much zero convictions. I mean, it doesn't take
Zero conviction, yes. Why?
I mean, there's been a few.
The reason for that is
and when they've managed
the process, by the time the case is closed and now the judges or the magistrates retreat to go and come up with their ruling, it takes forever, and that's where we are.
I mean, there's
if you are telling me that we have actually
embarrassing collapses
concluded
of cases, don't get me wrong,
Yes.
whereby, the prosecution has been accused of not having enough evidence to stand in court. But the judge's interpretation of this evidence is also leaning towards these culprits. I keep giving this example with Kidero, whereby evidence was deemed inadmissible because of how it was obtained. Now, I can understand, there is the rule of law and the right to a fair trial and so forth. But it becomes impossible to secure convictions when these people who have the best lawyers can use these legal technicalities and loopholes to get away. Judges need to start interpreting the law to give effect to what the law was there for in the first place, not for the protection of the people.
Our judges are
of the culprits.
Also, the same way you slap them on one side, they are also slapped on the other side by being too activist. Right? And this is activism by judges is something that we're saying that we needed to see in our judiciary. Instead of our judiciary just being so straight and narrow, you practice activism in your processes.
Expound
now,
on that.
Where you're saying, like now in the case of the Justice Mombi Ngoge ruling, where she's been accused of going beyond the powers that the law actually allows by saying if you've been charged, then you should step aside. Those who argue against that say this is a judge who's just practicing activism, but she argued and she looked at their case and how cases are being brought to court, and she applied sections of the Constitution that said this is how we shall uphold our dignity as a people. And she said, based on that, I think and I hold that this is what should happen, accused of activism. Now, in very, very many of these corruption cases, back to the point, many of them haven't actually gone to a place where we can say the prosecution has presented its case and the defense has also presented its case and we are done. And this is now the judge who's coming back and saying, I find no case. I find no case. But many of them...
There's this judge, what's his name, Odunga.
Yes.
He's been accused of the same, but...
of activism, yes.
Yes, but it appears that every time it's a case that involves the government and his ruling doesn't seem to favor the government, then the accusation rears its head.
Many times, actually, you'll find somebody who's sitting in that particular court, the Constitutional Review Court, is always accused of activism. Because that's the role, that's the job that they do.
I
Yes.
think also it's
Interpretation of the
important. The government needs to do some civic education so that people understand what the separation of powers is and the independence of the judiciary. So that when it comes to the fight against corruption, they understand where the bottlenecks may be. That it doesn't start and stop with the president. I think we were used to, presidents giving decrees as to who should get jailed and so on
Have they
previously.
Really? Have they
Yes,
stopped?
yes, they have stopped. Where, due process wasn't followed. So paradoxically, these lack of convictions could be testament to the democratic ideals that this administration is upholding, that we're respecting the courts and their independence. Although sadly,
what could we say
why
about
do you
the
laugh,
lack
CT?
of
I'm
conclusion
laughing
of cases?
because their acceptance is the reluctant version of it, because every time something happens, you get the impression that the government since has the mindset of former governments and former presidencies. We didn't have presidencies then. But where you are appointed and you ought to understand who has appointed you. And from that understanding, when you make a ruling, you should always bear in mind who it is who pays the piper. And when our judges appear not to understand this particular concept, then there seems to be a problem. Then accusations come. They are a bottleneck. They are this. They are that. But they
If
don't
we
do
look at the
themselves
number of
favors either.
cases, if we look at the number of cases that the DPP, corruption cases, that the DPP has put in front of the courts, and look at the actual convictions that the DPP has secured as a result, you would find that the ratio, and I'll give the figures after because there are quite a few figures to go into, but the ratio is not, or has no similarity with sort of criminal cases that are put forward and the number of convictions secured therefrom. So you start to question, what is the bottleneck? Here we're putting, we're giving you the evidence. You keep saying there's not enough evidence, and even changing the law as to the admissibility of that evidence.
Who changes the law?
There was, the judges can change the law as
no,
they go
they
along.
cannot.
Yes, of course they can. Their
Judges
rulings,
cannot change the law.
they can.
How?
Their rulings are the law. They set precedent.
But it doesn't go contrary to the law.
No,
Basically,
no,
they're
no,
just-
it doesn't
they're
go
You talk
just
about
contrary.
interpretation.
They're just
The
interpreting the
interpretation,
law.
of course, and they can be very mischievous to give effect to what
No.
their desired outcome is. This is this is the judge's job. So they can be very literal and just interpret the law directly. They can give the law its intended effect and stretch it, or they can be very mischievous. And so long as it's within statutory interpretation doctrines, they can actually change the law. And we see that all the time. We saw it with the ruling we were talking about stepping aside, and it's called activism. So long as it's done within the framework of the law, and it's within the framework of the Constitution, the judges changed the law. And we saw that with Kidero's case, whereby certain evidence was deemed to be inadmissible because of the way in which it was obtained. Now, if you're the DPP and you're trying to carry out investigations, and the courts have stipulated that you must warn somebody and get orders to investigate their bank account, what do you think the culprit or the suspect is going to do if he's given 2 days before you come and inspect his bank account? This is somebody with millions of dollars, not even billions even.
Jerry,
What do you think
truth
he'll
of
do?
The matter is this: there are state agencies who can have access to that very account, and the law allows them. Fortunately, there are not many. But if you are asking whether one can have access to those accounts, yes, you can.
But it will not be admissible evidence in court. So you can have access.
Interpretation.
You can have access for what? To what end, if you're the DPP, if you then cannot use this evidence? And this is what I'm saying. If the judge's intentions were different, i.e., they were not being paid perhaps by some of these people who've been accused of corruption,
You've
and
just
were
said
looking
that our
to get
judges who make
I'm not
decisions
saying
are being bribed.
this is-
Carry on.
Imputing
I'm
improper
speaking-
motive.
I'm speaking hypothetically here, of course, but I think if their intentions were noble in terms of ensuring that they uphold and help us in this fight against graft, you would find we have a lot more convictions. But what they've done is they've used the law, been very mischievous with their interpretation, so as to allow for these people to get away and use these legal technicalities.
But why doesn't
and this
the
is why we
DPP
don't have convictions.
Why does the DPP get more creative? If you're told this avenue is closed, Why don't you look for other avenues
Because
to present the
it
same
is
thing?
still you I am coming to, so you
It
will
doesn't
then
matter.
find another way to block it.
But
Look,
you have to look at what is behind all of this, then what is the intent? If the intent of the judiciary is at the very least to appear fair and just in all that they should do, then you must find another avenue
But yes,
to practice this.
But,
you have
but,
to.
but what is unfair about what they are doing?
They're doing their job.
Yes.
And Jerry, you said you're going to give us those statistics of, the many cases that have gone in and the ones that have secured
We'll do
conviction.
that after the
Let's
break,
also look at the
absolutely.
cases that have actually been taken by the DPP to court, and the DPP has concluded his case. If you look at all of them, in fact, just think NYS 1, NYS 2.
Still ongoing.
Kenya Power, Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Ports Authority,
this under
Auditor
Haji?
General. Yes.
All under
all
Haji.
these ones are-
Yes.
yeah. KPA, the Auditor General's office the other day, there's a case in court. Now we have the governors, NHIF. All these cases, how far have they gone? Has the DPP concluded? Has the prosecution concluded presenting its case? No.
And the question
This
is,
is
by very many people, why then does it take so long? That's the thing. And
Yes.
this is what people are agitating
And
for.
I'm taking the case back to the prosecution side. It is the investigator and the prosecutor to present their case.
The onus, of course, is on them.
If they're taking forever, for example, to launch their case, like in the case of the Auditor General, we saw there were the Deputy Auditor General, Deputy Auditor General, arrested over a weekend, again Friday, taken to court on a Monday. That case has not started. We haven't seen it starting.
No, also you
it
have to
keeps being
understand the
pushed.
complex nature of
NHIF
corruption.
CEO taken to court.
And why
charged.
must this arrest be on Friday? Why the drama of Friday? Why
Taken to-
Friday?
And then you're
Because
taken
of
to
the
court,
they
you're
can
charged.
spend the weekend in
Then you go and tell the public, you see, we've arrested these people, we've taken them to court. It's the judiciary that is a bottleneck. You have not
On
started
a Friday.
your case.
And it's not as though they want other cases before you brought this case.
Solomon in Mombasa is itching to join in this conversation. Good morning, Solomon.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Fine.
Today's debate is on fire. One, I have 4 things to say.
Four.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes. First of all, we should differentiate what is corruption and what is theft, because what we have mostly in these cases is just purely theft. That is one. Secondly, about general public pressuring on the prosecution of these cases, we have a problem. Kenyans, we have a problem. We forget very easily. As long as the Sonko thing will be on the limelight in the next 3 days, trust me, next week there will be another issue. So whatever issue will come in the media, it will make the Sonko thing fade away. So the pressure on Sonko will cease. Thirdly, sometimes when it comes to, in my understanding, is when it comes to the judicial system, it's not about a matter of fact. It's a matter about law. So you find, even if it's true I stole this money, but how I'll prove my case will determine my conviction or not. Now you have a problem with that. Then lastly, okay, to be honest, I think we should have one rule. Money you cannot account for will always belong to the government, because you cannot tell me I have 200 million in my account, I have never sold land, I have never done any business, and I say I own that 200 million. If I cannot account for that money, just give back money to the government, because some of these people, most of this money they have, they can't even account for. Like for example, the guy for the secretary, I don't know, for NHIF, is worth over 200 billion, buying houses all over, with a salary of 150,000. Even if you're a judge or a common mwananchi, can you explain your sources of income? Just simple. Money, if you cannot account for it, just that
Belongs
money
to the
belongs to the
state.
government. Yes, because some of these things, and most people, even the judicial system, they say it's corruption. But in my view, it's just purely theft.
It's theft.
Because what when you supply hewa, because because me I see corruption in the case of procedural issues, but theft, it is purely stealing money. This money is maybe supposed to help a medical a patient somewhere, to build a road somewhere, but someone just in his own thinking decide not to do that work.
Asante
Just
sana,
like, for
Solomon.
example, yes.
Thank you, Solomon. 0719-012-600. You can also join in this conversation. This is the limelight today is being focused today. Spotlight, rather, is being focused on the judiciary. That's the limelight. No. Spotlight is on the judiciary this morning. Do you agree? Is the judiciary the one that is actually a bottleneck in the fight against corruption? I'm saying, and Jerry Thorne is saying so. I'm saying, no, it's actually the entire judicial justice system, from the investigator all the way to the end.
Eric, can I take us a little back? one of our ardent listeners has actually given me a point when I asked the question, do you have people who've resigned? And someone told me yes. In the Kibaki government, both Saitoti and Kiraitu Mirungu resigned, and the president accepted the resignation. They resigned. Now, what was interesting was the governor, the current governor of Meru, not only did he come back, he became a senator. Okay, in the process, he also became governor. He's still governor now, but he also wrote a book in the process while he was in the cold.
But did he come back to government in the executive?
In that particular executive, no.
Okay.
But he came back politically.
Stronger.
Even stronger. The Mud of Politics. That was the name of the book.
Good.
So, in a sense, you're saying the fact that somebody steps down, it may appear like they are losing ground, but in reality, they're actually gaining ground. Yes. If Saitoti had been alive, maybe, or the good professor, maybe he would have fared the same way.
Let's pick this one from Stephen Gekonyo. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Fine, thank you.
I just wanted to add that Nyeri is right about activist judges and their changing of the law. There's not much anyone can do about that other than, again, go back and legislate to overcome some of those situations. But at the same time, we have many challenges. One, the prosecution sometimes does not do a very good job with its investigation. And then, of course, we have very good lawyers in this country who know how to go around some of these matters. And, so conviction becomes complex and difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, even the investigations themselves are tampered with by the judiciary. What happens is they refuse to grant them warrants, and then by the time they're succeeding to get warrants for search and so on, you find that documents have disappeared. So if the judiciary is already getting involved at the level of sort of issuing warrants for searching and so on, you'll find it becomes very complex. And remember, these are we're looking to get
you know how many cases have we seen this? People who have actually been taken to court and they are complaining that, we cannot admit this evidence because of warrants.
So essentially...
No, this is one of the hindrances. You can imagine how many they are.
Yeah, but how
and
many?
I wouldn't put it... I mean, this is a wild conjecture, but I'm sure it's got some basis and people will resonate with my sentiments. I wouldn't put it past judges to be paid off by these corrupt criminals. If the very nature of the case is about corruption, what's to stop this criminal, the accused, because he's still accused, from paying and bribing the judges? So
or
the fact that they might be corruption within the judiciary in and of itself.
I have Lydia. Lydia is online. Lydia, good morning.
Good morning, Spice FM.
Good morning.
I always believe in your program.
Thank you.
You help us to search for the best practice. And I always want to tell about my experience. We have a housing group, and the chairman gave the case to the advocate. The city council kept telling us we are on Mombasa, Nairobi Road when we are on Waiyaki Way. We have to pay rates. We have to pay rates as one plot. We have to pay rates as 3 plots. Under the same name, you can't have 3 places to pay 1 rate. Then the advocate put it to the court. Every time the case is adjourned, he sends us a bill. The case is adjourned, he sends us a bill. He sent us a total bill of 500,000 to do nothing.
Wow. This is a judge?
A lawyer.
A lawyer.
No, the lawyer.
Right.
So I told the chairman, let me deal. No, don't interfere with the lawyer. I went to city council and I told them, how can you tell us we're on Mombasa, Nairobi Road? I went to 6 officials. Then they told me, okay, bring a letter from land office now to tell us who you are.
Oh, wow.
I went to land office and I got it. And I gave it. They wrote a letter to the land office addressed it to city council, which I brought it to the lawyer. The lawyer delivered it to city council. And city council wrote a letter. We apologize, it was an error. I will never depend on the court ever again. The court is asleep and the clerks are also of bad quality. You can't get any help from the court. You have to deal with your enemy face to face in a friendly way, and they understand you and you understand them, and the matter can be finalized easily.
Thank you, Lydia. personal experience there, being given by Lydia, and I think she's brought in also the other aspect of that entire justice chain that I was
It's
talking
a
about.
systemic issue from what she's saying.
Lawyers as
Yeah.
well, playing some dirty games.
But where does it stop, Eric? If we're going to accuse judges, then you might as well accuse that entire system from policemen
That's what
to
I'm doing.
prosecutors
I am
to...
saying
Yes.
it's the entire system. It
Yes.
starts from the investigator, going all the way. And I think the judges are at the tail end because they are supposed to be making a decision once you've presented the case
Yes.
and you've finished your presentation. And then the defense has also presented their defense. That's when you can now start.
And when
holding
someone
judges.
says they presented a case, what's to make the case? What is it that guarantees that the case
was the best?
Yes, exactly. I mean, they could sabotage themselves. How would we know?
9:30. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Okay, make we see as they look for road. It be like say tree don't fall for Lavington, so you don't block everywhere. You not fit pass because as that tree don't day for road now, car not they pass left, you know they pass right. Then talk say road they bad for Siokimau, so you not fit enter Mombasa road from that area. It go take you time gently as then they talk Langata road one big mess as then they call them. As you won't come go join Thika road, it not go happen today. Traffic there everywhere. Langata road na hold up everywhere you look, left, right, center, or more wahala day for the road today. And as rain they fall like this, it be like say you no go anywhere because Jogo road as then talk say the current situation they everywhere wet pass everywhere. As you won't use bypass so come out from Mombasa road though, it no go happen today. The rain they fall, road not they move. Accident don't come join for Mombasa road near Total South Sea. So my friend, if you want pass, it be like say you find another road. Kukuma can't dig and go because as a day like this, you know they pass.
City.
Everything was fine until you went to the Kukuban go.
And whenever you're speaking,
that?
you must also know how to
Is there a
to
tree
put your
that
mouth.
they need to avoid?
The tree don't fall for road. What's you not here?
No, that I got. No, that I know.
So
In fact,
did the tree follow it? Didn't you
no,
said the tree don't fall?
The road doesn't
road.
Meaning
Don't
the road can't follow the tree.
No, not follow.
The tree has fallen for the road.
Then love.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice
28
FM.
minutes to 10 o'clock. Good morning, Alan in Nairobi.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I agree with you guys that this thing is systemic. What I think that if you had a system that takes people to court and jails them faster, you will jail so many people, and you will fill the prisons, and then the prisons will suffer from will experience a lot of budget problems. I think what we needed to do is to change the whole punishment model. We should have a more robust punishment model that includes people who are just told you will never work for the government again. People who are just told you resign at this stage. This thing of taking them through the narrow route of an inefficient judicial justice system, and then you start blaming the court. The big problem is that we got this corruption model from the World Bank. Tanzania even has somebody called an ethics commissioner, as if ethics can be legislated into being. What we need to do is just get out of you will never work for government again. A broader a more robust punishment model. That's my 10 cents.
Thank you very much, Alan. 0719-012-600. What's your 10 cents on this? As you can call in and give us your opinion. Also, you can comment on Facebook, Spice FM KE. Tag us on Twitter at Spice FM KE.
Interesting. Of course, also the difficulty in securing convictions comes from, the presumption of innocence in and of the first place. And given the psyche of the judiciary to try and uphold this presumption of innocence, you can see why it becomes increasingly difficult. And I'm speaking theoretically here, just for a judge to actually find somebody guilty. It becomes very difficult for the prosecution to prove their case. This is yet another hurdle, the psyche and the bias that the judiciary have in the first instance.
So should it be made easier?
Because I think you have different countries. You'll find the
should
level.
Should it be made easier?
It should with corruption cases. I think it really should with corruption cases. I mean, for instance, some of these legal technicalities that they use, the judges should be able to strike them down. And this is what I'm saying. The judges' intentions are questionable because judges do have leeway. We're clever enough as Kenyans, even our judges are clever enough to interpret the law to give it its spirit, so to speak.
But also, we're coming from a point where judges were actually being accused of that, of not at all listening to the accused. Like they just side constantly with the prosecution.
That's for the chicken thief.
One side.
That's for the chicken thief. That's very different. When it comes to these people, remember they're prestigious, they're powerful. We've never actually convicted people of this stature, Rotich and so on.
No,
so even for the judges, maybe they're intimidated, convicted, and they've gone to jail.
We have.
Okay, in my lifetime?
Yes, we have.
And who was that?
There was a former town clerk of the city of Nairobi called
Gakuo, who recently passed
on. He passed away,
Yes, they were jailed.
Okay, yes. I still don't think as big as the Minister of Finance in terms of stature. This is the biggest I've seen, and then we now have the Nairobi governor. So we have, and I remember that case, but we haven't seen it to this extent in terms of high-profile judge.
I mean, what it's going to take for people to see that there's some kind of trust or faith in the system, because we heard Lydia, who told us a few minutes ago that the entire system, forget about it, from clerk to legal personnel to lawyer, nobody. I don't trust it, just because of how the manner in which they carry out themselves. Now, it's going to take that. It's going to take the conviction of somebody high up on the ladder for people to say, okay, this works. Because by the time these charges are being brought, one of the first things that the DPP said, just in this case on Friday, he says, we have overwhelming evidence.
Always says that.
I mean, this is the thing.
Take it to court.
They always say this. So what happens to this overwhelming evidence somewhere in this pipeline? What happens to it?
In the case of NYS too, they haven't yet presented their overwhelming
exactly. And
2
if it's
years
so
later,
overwhelming, earth-shaking, earth-moving evidence, where does it all go?
You say the judges are the bottleneck.
Yes.
Seriously.
Surely, it's not their job to gather
it is. I want to go back to the judges.
Let's hear Karaoke. Karaoke is calling in from Nakuru. Good morning, Karaoke.
Yes, good morning to you guys.
Good morning.
How are you?
Salama kabisa.
Fine, thank you.
I've been listening to you since morning, and in fact, according to my conclusion, is that judiciary and the prosecution and whoever is having any investigation in terms of this corruption in this country, I think nobody is there to give us what we want as Kenyans. What I'm saying, I think can we go back to around 1994? Can you guys remember the case of Escobar?
Pablo.
The mafia war and the mafia drug lord. Can you remember that? I think we should have a different system in our country. Apart from the judiciary, because after all, we have proved that they are all corrupt, right?
Yeah.
If I may ask you a question. Today, in any case, every morning, lawyers go to judges' chamber. I don't know to discuss what. So do you expect them to give us a fair judgment? We have lawyers who are friends to these our judges. Can we have a different system whereby a judge that is going to be appointed to handle this issue, I think, should come away from the current nature of judiciary?
Okay.
So that we can see whether we can have fairness in terms of this corruption. Can we have that rather than what you are saying? Because to my conclusion is that we are heading to nowhere. Lawyers are corrupt, judiciary is corrupt, even the DPP. Can we have a different thing?
Maybe.
Like this symbolic to Escobar's case.
Thank you. Thank
Can
you.
we have something like that?
Thank you. Yes, food for thought. Of course, on some of these cases, what they did, this was a drug dealer, but they caught him on tax evasion to just ensure they could take him in. But going back to the judiciary, it should really be a balance, of course, of ensuring that we don't have criminal suspects roaming around and protecting the society, or rather, the judiciary exists not to grant freedom of criminal suspects, but to protect the society. And usually there's a balance of this. Now, we need to revisit these civil liberties that are granted and maybe deal with corruption slightly differently. I don't want to say extrajudicially, but perhaps loosen the laws a little bit. We've seen it when it came to terrorism, isn't it? The Terrorist Act, it removed a few liberties. Of course, they're not inalienable. They're not absolute rights.
You can be held
but
for
because
longer
there was
and-
yes, absolutely, you could be held for longer and so forth. But because there was a higher principle, which was to protect society and protect democracy and our lives and so on. Similarly, with corruption cases, some of these cases, especially when it comes to the admissibility of evidence, you can actually lower that threshold, because usually with admissibility of evidence and evidence laws, it's so that you don't interfere either with a person's personal life. There's a number of reasons as to why something wouldn't be admissible. Now, for Governor Kidero, there was evidence shining a light. It was crystal clear that he had been misappropriating funds from the county. But this evidence was not admissible, so he relied on these civil liberties. This is a case where the judges actually upheld his right to freedom over the protection of society.
They
Now,
just
these
thought
are the
they-
things we need to change. When I talk about the judge's will and intention and the lens through which and the perspective through which they have to deliberate over these cases, if their intention was in the right place, we would secure a lot more convictions. In fact, I'll be totally honest with you, Haji is going to have a very difficult time securing convictions for a number of reasons I've given. First of all, culturally,
Haji has a very difficult time because he is not presenting his cases in court.
that's a very easy
Haji
one
is
for the courts to
prosecuting
say. There's
cases
something
it isn't the
there-
courts in
there-
Nyeri.
There's something. It's very easy.
It's not the courts.
Sonko has admitted guilt. He
How?
has said, "I escaped from prison."
No,
That in and of itself-
Sonko went
What-
to
what-
court yesterday. He was charged with 13 counts, was it?
No,
he
no, no.
said
I'm talking
not
about
guilty.
I'm talking about publicly. Not on this charge sheet. I'm talking about when he's been on
Previously.
TV. Previously.
Okay.
And I know we must follow the law, but you don't need to be a lawyer, rocket scientist, a judge to know that the guy has been nicking money from Nairobi County.
No.
You need to prove
No,
it.
no, you do need to prove it. That's
Yes.
how the law works.
And that's why the
You need
issue
to-
is.
You
And
need to prove
I
it.
know,
That's
Jerry
how the law
suggesting
works.
we
The
lower
owners-
that threshold so that when someone says you have stolen,
when we
No,
think
not
you
on
have
a
stolen.
hunch. Not
When
on a
we think
hunch.
that
I'm
you
not
have.
saying we go on a hunch.
We have given somebody
I'm not
an
saying we
office,
go on a
an
hunch.
independent office. And in fact, we've even given him security of tenure. And the president has come and said, in fact, I'm going to even give you more support in terms of you have the support from the highest political office in the land. Take these cases to court. Now, this person who's holding this office is taking cases to court via, press conferences, and then the cases go and lie low in the courts. What is happening to that? I think when we're talking about, yes, let's raise the issue. Let's raise the issue about everybody. Let's raise the issues about judges. Let's raise the issue about the prosecution. Let's raise the issues about investigators. Because this is, judges have told us before. We saw the CJ during the corruption conference at Bomas, was it earlier in the year? Where he said, look, guys, so sometimes you as the DPP, you are bringing one NYS case and you're charging 22 people in one charge sheet. Each of them gets 2 lawyers. Now, shall we ever move?
When are we going to finish?
Shall we ever move?
Even if it
You
reading
know, you
out
get the impression that
It was
is
deliberate.
stage managed and it is sabotage from the get-go.
It is deliberate.
And then the judiciary is blamed.
Yes. And it starts from there. Let's cast our spotlight on everybody in that whole chain. Even the lawyers.
The entire
yes.
system.
If
The
we follow
lawyers
that
that you talk
process,
about, the
where
lawyers
does
in
that
the
system
defense.
always collapse? In court. Who is responsible for those decisions?
Because that's
in
the
court?
only place
the
that this
judiciary.
is the only
so
place
the
where it plays
judiciary is
out.
clearly the bottleneck. What we need to
No.
establish is why. Is the
It
judiciary
only plays
themselves
out.
corrupt?
It only plays out in the courts.
but-
It can't play out
But
anywhere
Jerry,
else.
this is faulty logic. The judiciary can only deal with what they have received.
Yes,
And
but
if they receive something that is faulty and they say it is faulty,
interfere with what they're likely to receive. First of all,
the
by
court can interfere.
Absolutely,
How?
by delaying orders. These guys, they need permission to do certain investigations.
This issue of
and
the
you will
bank
find-
is the
you
bank
will-
account
No,
issue
no,
of
it's not-
Kidero again.
No, it's not just the bank account. That is a very important judgment in terms of admissibility and corruption cases. But that's one aspect. I'll come to that. But even to get warrants they have to go to court.
For arrests?
The court, no, search warrants.
Search
The-
warrants?
Yes, the court will delay this. Hold on. By the time now, not EACC, the DCI is going to investigate, or the prosecutors are going to look for this evidence, or rather the investigators, you'll find that the documents don't exist anymore. So the courts are already interfering with even the collecting of this evidence.
But how do you know that it existed in the
that's
first
what-
place?
That's
Yes.
what, by the time the investigators are going for it, they know there is something. Now,
No, they
have a
say.
hunch.
no. Yes, but
They have a hunch
let's also
that
be
there's something.
logical. Let's,
We are
let's
being
do this
logical.
within the realms of how humanity and how we think and how we operate as people. Yes. The reason they want to investigate, or they're looking for these warrants to investigate, is because they know there's something,
There's
or they have a
reason
hunch
to
there's
believe.
something.
Yes.
Why should the courts delay it? They delay it, and then when the investigators go there, they find there's nothing.
In how many
Of course,
instances
if
have we
you
seen
are
that delay?
If you are the accused,
In the particular
no. This
cases
is
that we
something.
have.
This is something
How
they have
many
even
cases?
quoted themselves. They don't report all the cases where they've been
Because
denied
we have
warrants,
all these
or
cases in
denied
court,
warrants
Jerry.
are denied.
None of these cases have we seen the DPP come out and say, you know what, I had a solid case against XYZ, Kenya Pipeline, or Kenya Ports
They've said
Authority.
it. They don't have to say it in court, but they say it all the time. They speak.
Even in
They
public.
speak to the press,
Which-
and they
which
say
of these
we're having
cases-
serious problems. And
which
also,
of
they're
these
not out here
cases
to
have they
complain.
been-
That's not their job. Haji's job is to secure
Exactly.
convictions, right? Now, that is what he's working on. What I'm telling you is the judiciary is the bottleneck. I'm giving you examples, even from an investigatory point of
So
view.
you're saying-
they
No, but you
interfere.
haven't given an example.
I've given
No.
you the example.
You've made a
Where the
statement.
the DCI has been quoted as saying these guys, they delay their warrants so much, by the time we actually go for the search, the actual evidence has disappeared. Now you can see that happening. That's one aspect. So they interfere in the investigations. And then now in the courtroom, in terms of admissibility of evidence, they change the rules so that they don't admit. So eventually the DCI, they've managed to garner this, or to collect this evidence. And then the judge changes the law and says, actually, the way you went about collecting this evidence makes it inadmissible, because you've got this guy's civil liberties to protect.
You know, I
Now,
still
what
don't
I
get
am
this.
suggesting...
How is the
Hold
law
on.
changed here?
Hold on. Do you not understand judge-made law?
No,
Okay, you must
I
do law.
don't.
The law is
I
changed
don't.
through
I don't.
interpretation.
All
It's
right, explain it slowly.
through-
So let's go.
No,
Case
I
How it
don't.
changes.
No,
goes
no,
to-
no.
How does it change the law?
Matter goes to court and judge makes a ruling.
It's a ruling. So how does it change the,
The
law?
ruling
Explain how that impacts
becomes
on the
a
law.
court which is binding on lower or becomes the law which is binding on lower cases, and will sometimes then be taken and made the law through statute, through parliament. But that's now
Is it an illegal
law
process?
101. No, it's not an illegal process.
Is it unique to Kenya?
No.
So where's the problem?
This is jurisprudence and how it works.
Yes.
No, the problem is
Just
how it works.
jurisprudence us, please. Just
No,
take us through
no,
this
Siti,
thing.
I'm not taking you through it. People understand what I'm saying. I'm not taking you through basics. Law 101. I can't. I think I'm
Is the judiciary the bottleneck in the fight against corruption in this country? Call us in 0719-012-600. There are comments as well on Twitter at SpiceFMKE. Our hashtag is the Situation Room. And also you can post your comments on Facebook, SpiceFMKE, where we're live streaming. Good morning. It's 13 minutes to 10 o'clock.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Everything nice.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Jerry, I want to put it to you that we have had, police officers who are investigators and prosecutors who are so used to the old way of doing things, where because they looked at you and they didn't like you, they actually came and arrested you, they came and ransacked your home, and they planted evidence and took you to court and said, this is overwhelming evidence against Jerry. Now we have a new system. You've got to follow those structures. They've become crybabies because somebody, Jerry, has gone to court and sought anticipatory bail and said, because of this, I'm seeing like Eric is looking at me badly with his bad eye, and I want you to bar him from arresting me. And then you start complaining. Follow the procedure. 0719-012-600. Let's hear what you think about this as you call in 0719-012-600. Also, comments coming in on Facebook on the issue of, is the judiciary the bottleneck in our fight against corruption? Is it or is it not?
Also look at things like the threshold for beyond reasonable doubt.
Before
These are
we
the
go
changes
there,
we can
may
make.
I pick this one?
Yes.
Yegon, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Eric.
Salama kabisa.
Yes. I think from my point of
Salimia
view...
kila mtu Yegon.
Oh, let me...
You were waiting in anticipation. Anticipatory greetings.
Yes, you know, the time is moving so fast. That's why I wanted to contribute very fast.
All right, yeah.
Morning, Yegon.
Good morning, Jerry. So I think most of the cases in our country are being hindered by the judiciary. Most of the suspects are the one who have for example, when an warrant of arrest is being issued, you find they say the suspects rushing to court to block the
arrest,
the warrant of arrest or warrant of search. So there's no way the DCI or the DBB will end up getting a concrete evidence to prosecute these people. Because the courts are the one who determine all these things. You take in your evidence, they say, no, this is not enough. There's not enough evidence to prosecute this person. You have heard even Maraga saying this, that you bring in people with no evidence, and they are the one who normally block the warrant of arrest or issue such warrants.
So, Yegon, if I may ask you a question, are you then saying that what the courts are doing, they are breaking the law?
The courts are breaking the law. I will give you one example. There were a case of Cyrus Chirongo. When the courts declared him bankrupt, he cannot pay debts. After some few days, there was an issue of warrant of arrest for not paying debts. So you see how the courts are breaking the laws. And you could hear even the previous case at the court. You hear the judge telling this, the likes of Kinamurkomen, can you go and relook this law? Because there are laws which even them, they cannot rule over it. Yeah.
Thank you, Yegon.
Thank you. So he agrees, of course, that the judiciary is the bottleneck. And the balance here, or the competing elements here within the judiciary are, of course, individual civil liberties and protecting society. Now, when they they lend more credence or lend more, I would say, clemency to the individual, then you have situations where even admissibility of the evidence or them or actually not issuing search warrants in time and so on, you have a resultant zero convictions for corruption in Kenya. Because the judiciary they themselves are not in this to win it, i.e. they're not in the fight against graft to win it. And they're doing it, CT keeps asking, is it illegal? They're doing it within a legal framework. The law can be very mischievous.
Because the law allows the judges to protect you as a suspect.
Absolutely. But
and
the
when you
law,
go there telling the judges, please protect me, what do you want the judges to do?
But
Look
the
at
law,
you and say,
the
you look
law
like you're
also
a criminal.
has a duty, or rather the judges also have a duty to protect society. Now, the judges are leaning more towards the civil liberties of this individual, of which they can, and interpreting the law to give effect to his rights, as opposed to pushing the law and interpreting it to give effect to protecting society and fighting the war against corruption. And this is why I'm saying maybe we need to release some aspects of the law from the judiciary so that corruption or aspects of corruption can be dealt with extrajudicially, but also perhaps lower the threshold for doubt in terms of it's not beyond reasonable doubt. It could be on a balance of probabilities or possibilities, as with civil cases. Don't put any restrictions in terms of admissibility of evidence. It's already very complex and difficult to gather this evidence. So once you start putting the evidence laws that exist with most criminal cases, all other criminal cases, it becomes even more difficult to secure convictions. Remember what these corruption scandals do, what the theft of this money does to the country. It's worse than terrorism in terms of the resultant deaths
even
and
the
so
judges,
on.
because
Bear in mind that you're coming from a background where We had previous regimes where you knew very well that the moment that case appeared before the judge, you were in jail.
In fact, the judges will
you
even
knew
sit over the weekend.
You knew
to take you to
You
jail.
had prosecutors. There was a famous one called Chunga. You knew. Now, against that background, you then have to understand
And that's
how
why
it
we-
is. The constitution
I understand,
was
and-
steered
Let
toward.
me take this one. This is Norman in Kisumu. Good morning, Norman.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, good
Eric.
morning.
Good morning.
How is the panel?
We're
Panel
fine.
is well.
Yeah, I think the DPP Nordin Haji should have even more difficulty getting this evidence to present to court because the government misused the powers that we gave them initially. Because I remember during the Moi era, some policemen would come home and ask for money, and if the money was not there, they would take maybe chairs or properties in the home, maybe chicken. So if the police are not put in check, they always misuse the powers that they have. So that is what pushed Kenyans to vote in a new constitution so that we could change the constitution to ensure that everyone enjoys the civil liberty.
Yes.
Yeah.
To
so
protect ourselves from the
government-
state.
Yeah, to protect ourselves from the state.
Is that more pressing than the need to protect society? You know, rights are changing. I think terrorism is what set the agenda, where people were willing to compromise certain rights for the protection of their lives and their ideologies and their livelihoods. We saw that with terrorism. If we can accept that corruption has the same impact as terrorism does in terms of long-lasting effects and lives that are lost as a result of monies not going to the correct places, then maybe we need to tweak our laws and maybe remove a few civil liberties from these individuals in order to protect society, so that the balance moves more towards protecting society. And the things I'm talking about are things like the burden of proof shifting a little bit, so that there's not such a heavy onus on the prosecution, in that maybe it's not beyond reasonable doubt of getting to 98%, but it's on a balance of probabilities, such as with civil case litigation.
Open to abuse.
No, our laws are fine. Our laws are fine.
But
They're perfect.
how
We have
you also have a
situation
lawyer. You're a
where
rich
our
person. You have a
security
lawyer.
Forces or the police are not trusted. The judicial system is not trusted. Why? Because historically that's what we've had. The very
So the
process you're
emphasis is
talking
on
about,
protecting our civil liberties, which
but
is
the
fine.
process that you have is, in my opinion, restoring that confidence, which you're saying
I'm
it isn't.
talking only corruption cases, grand corruption cases. So these are people also mitigating some of these assertions or these suggestions that I'm making, and to ensure that they do have their civil liberties intact. Can afford expensive lawyers. They can afford people who completely understand the law and will see when they're actually any of their rights are being violated, or anything, there's an unfair trial at hand. But the laws need to change in order to deal with corruption. We cannot deal in the same realms as we do with normal crime.
The laws are not the bottleneck here.
No. The laws with terrorism had to change.
No.
They had to change
no.
because terrorists were getting away because of the defense of their civil liberties by the judges, and then they were becoming a danger to society. There was an overriding principle, the protection of society. The overriding principle is the protection of society.
But we cannot overlook the practitioners of the law in this. We can't, because they are the ones essentially
They're at the heart of
they
it.
are the heart of
Who,
it.
the
They're the
lawyers?
ones who deal with it
The
every
whole
day.
chain.
I said earlier, lawyers
whole
agreed.
system. It's the entire system.
No, lawyers are individual members of the public. They're not part of the
to
government.
demand a bribe from you, like Norman was telling us, he finds that he doesn't like your seat, so he can't even take your seats. He takes you to court and charges you with
That's what
terrorism.
used to happen.
Yeah.
With
That's
terrorism.
what used to happen. Now, what I'm talking about.
No, it was actually worse than it stated.
But so, I mean, coming
In
full
conclusion.
circle, what I'm saying here, it's going to be very hard to secure convictions. And what the public wants to see in order to believe that there is a fight against graft by the current administration is actual convictions of this, high-profile personalities, these powerful personalities. As I said, the judiciary, which I've discussed throughout this last hour, is actually the bottleneck.
And I think the entire system is actually the moment we start educating the public on how the entire system works, we are going to expose where the bottlenecks are. if the issue is about the law, then we should see the DPP's office also campaigning for the change to the law, not going to blame somebody else for
No.
job
They
you haven't
must
done.
blame the judiciary so that we have the discussion about changing the law, because it is the judiciary that's leaning more towards the civil liberties of these individuals as opposed to protecting society as a whole from corruption.
These individuals are members of the same society. You know?
Absolutely, but there's an overriding
do have
principle
rights.
here. They do, but there's an overriding principle here. I'm just saying, when they put on their lens and they're deliberating with the fact, they need to lean more towards the public and the voters and the electorate and the Kenyans than towards Sonko, let's say.
Thank you for joining us in the Situation Room this morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. The conversation continues on our social media handles, and then join us again tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's Eric Latif, Nduoko, Nyeri, Thorn, and C.T. Muga. Now to 3 o'clock, uninterrupted music, Spice Soul, and then, of course, The Drive, Spice Drive with Monique. And Adults in the Room will be with you again from 7 to 10 o'clock. Good morning. It's now 10 a.m.
Spice up your life. Spice up your life.